Chapter 759 Harvest of the War. Chapter 759 Harvest of the War. Shifeng could not help his bitter smile as he heard the NPC receptionist's words. Sure enough, it isn't that easy to establish a city. Shifeng had thought it strange that Charlin had so kind-heartedly given him a city-building order in exchange for only 10,000 immortal souls. This reward was much too extravagant for an epic quest. Sure enough, there is another test to this. God's domain was currently still in its early stages. Even a first-rate guild would have to spend a relatively long time just to collect several thousand gold. After all, for a guild to develop, expand, and improve itself, it would have to spend an exorbitant amount of money. Normally, having even 1,000 gold lying around was considered a luxury for a first-rate guild. Only Zero Wing, which had the candlelight trading firm, Stone Forest Town, and a large number of guild quests, had a daily income of several thousand gold. However, after expanding the guild, they had a wider variety of expenditures. After deducting operating costs and salaries, Zero Wing raked in a clean profit of roughly 1,000 gold each day. After a month, the guild would make around 30,000 gold. The other guilds could only dream of such wealth. However, Shifeng understood that, in reality, he was still just a poor bastard. This was only a fraction of what he needed to establish his city. The basic construction fee alone cost 120,000 gold. After including the cost of dealing with monster attacks, it was practically impossible for him to earn what he needed to construct the city. He also had to think of the necessary building construction that he would need after the city itself was complete. Shifeng thought back to when Shadow had constructed a mana tower in its first city. The mana tower's required raw materials had cost close to 10,000 gold. The guild had also hired a bunch of NPCs to deal with the construction. Overall, the mana tower had cost Shadow 35,000 gold. The black market, on the other hand, had been somewhat cheaper. Even so, its construction still cost over 20,000 gold. If one added all the costs together, they would discover that the initial construction fee was only the first step to constructing a city. Even so, a large guild would willingly sacrifice everything it had, seeking sponsors and selling small portions of the guild's shares, to build a functioning city. Once the city was built, however, it would be a money magnet. In the past, to construct its first city, Shadow had sought out over a dozen sponsors. It was also then that Shadow split its shares between many financial groups and corporations. If Zero Wing did not wish to rely on external powers to construct a guild city, then it needed to earn a lot more money. When Shifeng thought about the need to multiply his current income by several times, he felt his head throb. When Shadow had constructed its first city, there were far more people playing God's domain, and it had been much easier to earn money. Currently, the majority of the players in God's domain had yet to reach level 30. Hence, the challenge of earning more than 100,000 gold was significantly more difficult than it had been. Moreover, the candlelight trading firm's daily income was nearly at its maximum. It would be very difficult to increase it. As for Stone Forest Town, the town's income mainly came in the form of magic crystals. Moreover, it was also impossible to increase the town's income within a short time. As for the income from guild quests, it could not even begin to compete with the income of the candlelight trading firm and Stone Forest Town. It seems I'll have to look for a new source. Shifeng began to consider the matter. Currently, the most profitable trade involved selling top-tier weapons and equipment. Consumables were the next most profitable items. Zero Wing did not even have enough top-tier weapons and equipment to equip all of its members, so how could it possibly afford to part with those items? Just as Shifeng's headache over searching for a new source of income grew, Aqua Rose contacted him. "Guild leader, I have the post-war report ready for you. We struck gold this time," Aqua Rose said excitedly. "After deducting the compensation and rewards for our guild members, we obtained 18,456 pieces of level 25 mysterious iron equipment, 3,187 pieces of level 25 secret silver equipment, 549 pieces of level 25 fine gold equipment, 84 pieces of level 25 dark gold equipment, 1,427 pieces of level 30 mysterious iron equipment, 241 pieces of level 30 secret silver equipment, 53 pieces of level 30 fine gold equipment, and 4 pieces of level 30 dark gold equipment. There were always spoils after a great war. However, Shifeng had never imagined that they would enjoy such a bountiful harvest. This was all net income. With this equipment enriching the guild warehouse, they could increase Zero Wing's strength by a large margin. If they had purchased all of this equipment, they would have had to spend over 50,000 gold. With this equipment and the equipment we already had in the guild warehouse, we will have no problems expanding the guild by another 30,000 to 50,000 members. Previously, Aqua Rose had still struggled with her headache over the issue of equipment after expanding the guild. Zero Wing had already become a large guild, acknowledged by every player in Star Moon Kingdom. Its fame had even surpassed the Star Alliance and Ouroboros. As a result, more players reached out in an attempt to join the guild each day. Hence, this was the perfect time to expand. However, they would suffer if they did not have enough equipment in the guild warehouse for the new recruits. Initially, Aqua Rose had considered limiting the number of new members they recruited to 10,000. Now that they had obtained so much new equipment, however, they could recruit an additional 30,000 to 40,000 players. However, most of the equipment's durability has nearly been depleted. The repair fees will cost us a lot. I was thinking of taking out a portion of the guild funds to repair the equipment, Aqua Rose suggested. If it were only a small amount of money, Aqua Rose could make the decision herself. However, too much equipment needed repairs. Hence, she needed Shifeng's permission before she moved forward. Hearing this, Shifeng felt another headache bloom. There isn't a lot left. Sell some of the lower quality equipment and use the money to repair the rest, Shifeng said after some thought. I understand. Aqua Rose then disconnected the call. After speaking with Aqua Rose, Shifeng suddenly recalled the forging design inside his bag. The strengthening device. This item was capable of strengthening a player's equipment, reducing the consumption of durability. This was a must-have for current players. During lower levels, the majority of players in God's domain would not think much of their equipment's wear and tear. However, as players reached higher levels, they encountered far more powerful monsters. Naturally, the burden on their equipment grew as they began to take more damage. The repair fees alone would demand the majority of a player's earnings. Selling the strengthening devices would be a great source of income. Shifeng could not help but smile. Previously, he had considered selling the magic devices. However, magic devices were too precious and expensive. Only the various guilds' upper echelons could afford to purchase and use them. Moreover, there weren't even enough magic devices to outfit Zero Wing's members. Fortunately, it was a different story for the strengthening devices. Shifeng immediately left the city hall and hurried towards the candlelight trading firm. Isn't this the broken sword that Galaxy Past had dropped when he died? While Shifeng searched through his bag for the strengthening device forging design, he discovered an extraordinarily eye-catching, broken sword. The broken sword's aura alone was enough to make Shifeng's heart skip a beat, despite it sitting idle in his bag. Chapter 760, Flawed Weapon 1000 Transformations. Chapter 760, Flawed Weapon 1000 Transformations. Inside Shifeng's bag, aside from the Bible of Darkness, the broken sword was the next most powerful item. Even the epic weapon Petrified Thorn could not compete with the broken sword's presence. Just what kind of weapon is this? Shifeng carefully retrieved the broken sword from his bag and clicked to check its statistics. Dilapidated broken sword. It's impossible to tell which era this ancient weapon originated from based on its appearance. However, the broken sword's blade radiates a frightening magic power, and its edge is still sharp enough to slice through space itself. Although the blade has already been broken, its engraved, divine runes are still intact. More secrets might be revealed under a Grandmaster Forger's examination. What a powerful weapon. I actually need to take it to a Grandmaster Forger if I want to know anything more. Shifeng's interest in the broken sword grew. A Master Forger was already a towering figure in God's domain. There were very few throughout Star Moon Kingdom. As for a Grandmaster Forger, they were treated with fear and respect, regardless of where they were from. There had been countless Tier 4 and Tier 5 powerhouses who dreamed of hiring a Grandmaster Forger to craft them a custom weapon. In God's domain, who wouldn't want a weapon that had been made specifically for them? Although Master Forgers could produce epic weapons, their success rate was abysmally low. Even so, many powerhouses flocked to them. After all, a tailored epic weapon would allow them to exert more of their own strength. Hence, Master Forgers enjoyed a lofty position in society. Meanwhile, a Grandmaster Forger had a much greater chance of producing an epic item. They even had some chance of producing a legendary item. In terms of status, Master Forgers could not compete with them at all. I want to see just what this broken sword's true identity is. Saying so, Shifeng activated omniscient eyes to appraise the broken sword. After a full 30 seconds, omniscient eyes finally finished appraising the broken sword. 1000 transformations. 65th of God's Domain's 108 flawed weapons. However, due to the sword's broken blade, it is now no more than scrap metal. Fortunately, the blade's divine runes remain nearly intact. The sword can be remolded and repaired using 100 mana stones. So, this is the rumored flawed weapon 1000 transformations. In the past, Shifeng had only heard about this short sword. Throughout God's domain, there were a total of 36 famed swords and 108 flawed weapons. Famed smiths and craftsman forgers had crafted everyone, and they were all peerless weapons. Legendary figures had once used the 36 famed swords. The flawed weapons, on the other hand, were different. Although the legendary figures of the past had never wielded any of these weapons, they were something far beyond ordinary epic weapons. After all, the flawed weapons were the results of famed smiths and craftsman forgers' failed attempts to forge legendary weapons. A weapon produced with the same materials as a legendary weapon was naturally not something ordinary epic weapons could compare to. Meanwhile, the 1000 transformations had been made vastly famous by a player in Shifeng's previous life. In the past, a Tier 6 assassin god had wielded the 1000 transformations and had claimed countless expert lives with the blade. Among those experts, even the era's apex experts had died to the blade. This was precisely the reason that Assassin had become one of God's domain's solo players that others feared and respected. Meanwhile, that Assassin's name had been Feather. Although his ID was ordinary, nobody dared to show him disrespect. In the past, a few people with too much time on their hands had compiled a list of God's domain's solo players that one should avoid provoking. Among them, the top 10 were known as the 10 great solo players. One of these 10 great solo players had been the cleric god Violet Cloud. However, Violet Cloud had merely ranked 8th on the list, whereas the assassin god Feather had ranked 3rd. Shifeng had never imagined that he would obtain Feather's weapon. Although 100 mana stones is a steep price, owning a flawed weapon will be a worthwhile trade. Shifeng inwardly smiled. For most, obtaining 1 mana stone was an extremely difficult endeavor. To Shifeng, however, there was no challenge to it at all. He only needed enough magic crystals to synthesize. Immediately, Shifeng contacted Melancholic Smile and Fire Dance. He had Melancholic Smile retrieve 10,000 magic crystals and instructed Fire Dance wait for him at the candlelight trading firm. An hour later, Shifeng arrived. Both Fire Dance and Melancholic Smile had waited patiently in his special forging room. Guild leader, those are the 10,000 magic crystals you've asked for, Melancholic Smile said as she pointed towards the magic crystals carefully stacked on the table. If other guilds realized that Zero Wing could easily take out 10,000 magic crystals, they might bang their heads against a wall in frustration. Shifeng nodded. 10,000 magic crystals should be just enough to synthesize 100 mana stones. If converted to coins, 100 mana stones was worth far more than an epic weapon. However, anyone would be willing to trade 100 mana stones for a flawed weapon. Guild leader, why have you called me here? Fire Dance asked softly. Although she was thrilled that Shifeng had called for her, she was not a forger. She was only apt at fighting. She could not help the candlelight trading firm. What do you think about this weapon? Shifeng retrieved the petrified thorn from his bag and handed it to Fire Dance. After receiving the weapon, Fire Dance checked its statistics and was stunned. An epic weapon. Fire Dance could not believe her eyes. The true fire blades were top tier, even among dark gold weapons. Compared to the petrified thorn, however, they were no different than trash. Yes. This weapon is for you. I hope you use it well, Shifeng said. He could not help but smile as he watched Fire Dance's excitement. However, this is only one of the two I've prepared for you. You'll have to wait a while for the second. Another one? Fire Dance was nearly dying with excitement after receiving an epic weapon. Yet, now, Shifeng was actually going to give her a second one. Fire Dance had even wondered if she had misheard him. It wasn't just Fire Dance, but Melancholic Smile, who stood beside her, was similarly shocked. Until now, although she had heard about the various large guilds accumulating quite a stock of top-tier dark gold weapons, she had yet to hear anything regarding the rumored epic weapons. One could just imagine how rare epic weapons were. Yet, Shifeng could hand out two such weapons so casually. Moreover, both were meant for assassins. It was simply inconceivable. Melancholic, take this design and learn it. Use as many materials in the warehouse as you need. If there are not enough, have Aqua Rose try to obtain more. Produce as many as you can. Shifeng then handed the strengthening device forging design to Melancholic Smile. Although forging the strengthening device was particularly difficult, Melancholic Smile was an intermediate forger. With a little practice, she should have a relatively high success rate. Shifeng did not have the time to forge the items himself, of course. Melancholic Smile's eyes shone after she examined the design. Nothing interested a forger more than forging designs. It was especially true for advanced forging designs. Compared to epic weapons, the strengthening device forging design was far more attractive to Melancholic Smile. Moreover, the strengthening device's effect was astounding. It would significantly reduce equipment's durability consumption. Unlike the advanced whetstones, the demand for this item on the market would be immense. Advanced whetstones had already saturated the market, and many guilds could produce their own. On the other hand, the strengthening device would be unique to the candlelight trading firm. It would become a hot-selling item, no matter where they sold it. After Shifeng finished directing the women, Melancholic Smile rushed back to her own special forging room to research the strengthening device production method, leaving Fire Dance and Shifeng behind. Chapter 761 – Visit from Various Parties. Chapter 761 – Visit from Various Parties. In the spacious special forging room, Shifeng carefully took out the Philosopher's Stone and placed it on the stone table. He then began his alchemical synthesis. Hopefully, 10,000 magic crystals will be enough. Shifeng still felt a slight sting. He saw the synthesis success rate of 50%. During the war in the Stoneclaw Mountains, the Mana Pulse Cannon had needed to consume 1,000 magic crystals for each shot. Aqua Rose had fired the cannon over 30 times. Although it had been magnificently effective, over half of Zero Wing's magic crystal supply had been depleted during the war. Now, the guild had barely 15,000 magic crystals remaining, and he was about to use another 10,000. Even to Zero Wing, this expenditure was considerable. While Shifeng synthesized mana stones, Fire Dance sat out of his way and watched quietly. When will I truly become an asset to guild leader? When Fire Dance recalled the danger she had faced during this war, frustration filled her heart. If not for Shifeng, the Flower of Seven Sins would have wiped out Zero Wing's main force. Despite having an advantage in attributes, she had been utterly helpless against that Seven Sins party leader. Although their guild had won, they were still far from being a match for God's Domain's major powers. Stone Forest Town. After the war between the Star Alliance and Zero Wing, Stone Forest Town's atmosphere had transformed. Originally, the various large guilds had quietly eyed Stone Forest Town and waited for Zero Wing to suffer defeat. Once Zero Wing lost its prestige, the guild would lose members. After that exodus, they simply needed to gang up on Zero Wing to obtain Stone Forest Town. However, their plans had vanished into thin air when the Star Alliance had been defeated. Moreover, they had finally seen Zero Wing's true strength. The Star Alliance had suffered over 50,000 casualties. The various guilds shared a similar death count. In total, the Star Alliance and the various large guilds had lost over 100,000 elite players. In contrast, Zero Wing had only lost 4,128 members, while Ouroboros had only lost close to 30,000 members. Based on the death counts of either side, Zero Wing's power was apparent. Despite only dispatching an army of 10,000 elite players, Zero Wing had defeated an enemy several times its size. Meanwhile, Zero Wing had over 20,000 elite members in its midst. With such strength, what guild in Starmoon Kingdom would dare to challenge Zero Wing? The Star Alliance's fate served as the best example. After the Star Alliance had been defeated, several thousand members had withdrawn from the guild within an hour. Moreover, due to the disappearance of the upper echelons, despite the guild elders' attempts to stabilize the situation, over 30,000 players had left the Star Alliance. As time passed, this number would only increase. Making a rough estimate, the various large guilds guessed that the Star Alliance had lost at least 20 to 30% of its members from just this single war. It would be extremely difficult for the guild to recover from such a huge loss. Although Zero Wing and Ouroboros had both lost close to half their members in this war, they had recruited far more than those they had lost. Moreover, due to their overwhelming victory, both guilds managed to collect plenty of weapons and equipment, filling their guild warehouses. Not only had the guild's prestige grown after this war, but they had also increased their overall strengths. Many of the other guilds grew envious of this situation. As a result of this war, Ouroboros had also replaced the Star Alliance as Starmoon City's overlord, becoming the city's #1 guild. One was the #1 guild of Starmoon City, while the other was the #1 guild of White River City. With these guilds working together, who would dare attack Stone Forest Town? On the contrary, now that Zero Wing had already taken care of its main enemy, it shifted its concentration towards the other guilds that plotted against it. For a time, the various large guilds that had joined hands with the Star Alliance felt an impending doom. None of them knew what Zero Wing would do next. Even if Zero Wing joined hands with Ouroboros and laid claim over the Stoneclaw Mountains, none of the other guilds could do anything about it. The Stoneclaw Mountains had become an important source of magic crystals for the various guilds. If they were banished from Stone Forest Town, their harvest would be limited. They would stagnate. Hence, immediately after the war, various guild leaders and upper echelons hurried to Zero Wing's guild residence in hopes of negotiating with Shifeng. However, Shifeng did not have that much time to waste on these people. Hence, he had passed the responsibility to Aqua Rose. Currently, the guild leaders and upper echelons from the various Starmoon Kingdom guilds occupied Zero Wing's residential reception hall. Normally, these individuals were extremely secretive about their intentions, and arranging a meeting was rare. Yet, now, all these powerful individuals sat obediently, waiting for their turn. Next, Xiao Jiao, Aqua Rose's female assistant, shouted in the reception hall. Immediately, unparalleled, the guild leader of the second-rate guild Heaven's Gate, stood and walked into Zero Wing's meeting room. Unparalleled was a level 34 ranger. He wore level 30 fine-gold rank or above equipment. He was an expert who had reached the Trial Tower's 6th floor. In an ordinary NPC city, he would be considered one of the top experts. Unfortunately, in front of Aqua Rose, he was no one special. Heaven's Gate was a second-rate guild that occupied 2 cities within Starmoon Kingdom. Even here, it was a relatively powerful guild. However, when Unparalleled entered the meeting room, he had no choice but to show Aqua Rose proper respect. Heaven's Gate was indeed the overlord of 2 cities. However, those cities' total player population had not yet reached 400,000. On the other hand, White River City's population closed in on 5 million. Moreover, the city housed numerous elite and expert players. Other cities could not compare to White River City. Guild leader Unparalleled, let's not waste each other's time. Here's the contract. If you have no issues with it, please sign here, Aqua Rose said as she took out a contract and handed it to Unparalleled. The contract was quite simple. If Heaven's Gate wished to remain in Stone Forest Town, the guild would have to hand over 15% of its total magic crystal income to Zero Wing. Otherwise, Heaven's Gate would be banished from Stone Forest Town. At the end of the day, Stone Forest Town was just a town, not a city. It could only contain a limited number of players. Initially, not many players had visited Stone Forest Town, so it had not mattered whether or not they collected fees from the various large guilds. However, once mainstream players reached level 30, the town would begin to see an influx of activity. Hence, they could not just allow the other guilds and players to occupy the town's limited space for nothing. They had to collect a small fee, similar to how cities charged entry fees. After all, they had not established a town for charity, but to increase their profits. Of course, it was impossible for a town to collect an entry fee like cities. However, it was possible to adjust the repair fees and accommodation fees in Stone Forest Town. Guilds that did not sign Zero Wings contract would experience doubled repair fees and tripled accommodation fees during their future visits to the town. For those who signed the contract, however, the rates would remain the same. You bastards! Unparalleled paled. He had never imagined that Zero Wings' demands would be so vicious. This contract was an agreement to join Zero Wings' labor force. If you have nothing else to say, then please leave. Aqua Rose gestured towards the door. Chapter 762, Grandmaster Forger. Chapter 762, Grandmaster Forger. Unparalleled never thought that Aqua Rose would not show any intention of persuading him at all. With no better choice, he could only sign the contract. Currently, over 100 guilds had come to Zero Wings' residence in Stone Forest Town, and over a dozen of them were second-rate guilds. Who knew which guild had signed Zero Wings' contract, and which had not? It would be fine if nobody signed a contract with Zero Wing. However, if some did while others did not, those who did not sign it would definitely fall behind in their development at the Stoneclaw Mountains. After all, the rest stop known as Stone Forest Town was simply too beneficial for the purpose. On one hand, members of guilds that signed the contract needed to travel only about an hour to reach the regional dungeon. On the other hand, players from guilds that did not sign it had a travel time of over a dozen hours. The former would have a tremendous advantage over the latter, whether it was in terms of revival point or equipment repair. If the situation persisted, what would become of the second-rate guilds that did not sign the contract? Magic crystal was now the most critical resource after coins. Even after handing over 15% of its magic crystals, a guild would still earn substantially more than the alternative should they abandon the assistance of Stone Forest Town. In the end, the choice was obvious. It seems that from now on, nobody will be able to stop Zero Wings' development in Starmoon Kingdom, Unparalleled thought as he left the meeting room. When he saw the reception hall packed full of guild representatives, he could not help but sigh inwardly. In truth, they should already consider themselves lucky. Unlike them, the dozen or so guilds that had secretly assisted the Star Alliance did not even get the opportunity to sign the contract. Zero Wing had immediately banished these guilds from Stone Forest Town after the war ended. In the future, these guilds would most likely not be able to develop themselves at the Stoneclaw Mountains even if they wanted to. On the other hand, due to this contract, Zero Wing's income in magic crystals would increase by 2- or 3-fold at the very minimum. Originally, the guild's daily income of magic crystals was already plenty frightening enough to supply the daily needs of every core member within the guild. This provision was a feat no other guild could achieve. If Zero Wing's magic crystal supply doubled or tripled, the guild's core members wouldn't be the only ones to receive magic crystals from the guild. The guild's elite members would be able to get a share too. At that time, even Zero Wing's elite members would improve rapidly. Inside one of the special forging rooms of the Candlelight trading firm, Shifeng finished synthesizing 100 mana stones after 2 hours. The amount of magic crystals he had expended was somewhat lower than he had initially expected, only over 8,000 crystals. The mana stones placed on the table looked splendorous. Just their presence increased the mana density within the entire room significantly. Although the mana stones were merely the size of a fist, they contained a frightening amount of mana. If fully utilized, there was enough mana here to turn the entire Stone Forest Town into ash instantly. My job's finally done. Next up will be repairing 1,000 transformations. Shifeng carefully put away the 100 mana stones. He then looked towards Fire Dance and said, "Let's go. We're going to visit a smithy." Although Fire Dance had no idea why they were going to a smithy, she still followed after Shifeng immediately, leaving behind the serene and elegant special forging room. Shifeng first stored the Philosopher's Stone back in his warehouse. He then took an advanced horse carriage with Fire Dance and headed towards Celiora's smithy. To ordinary players, even meeting a master forger was already a tough challenge. As for meeting a grandmaster forger, that was practically a dream. However, no one less than a grandmaster forger could repair a weapon like 1,000 transformations. Besides Celiora, Shifeng had never heard of another grandmaster forger in Starmoon Kingdom. If he had not been lucky enough to help Celiora become a grandmaster forger, Shifeng would most likely be having a massive headache at this moment over figuring out how to get 1,000 transformations repaired. Shifeng did not know that, when Galaxy Past had obtained 1,000 transformations, he had been extremely elated. He had even mobilized the entire Star Alliance to search for a grandmaster forger. Unfortunately, even after scouring the length and breadth of Starmoon Kingdom, they could not find any trace of a grandmaster forger within the kingdom. In the end, he had no choice but to give up on the endeavor. If Galaxy Past were to find out that Shifeng was able to locate one so casually, he would definitely have a heart attack. Not only had he failed to use the item that he had obtained after going through many difficulties, but he had also given his enemy an advantage. When Shifeng arrived before Celiora's smithy, the large steel door of the little house was still shut tight. There was not a single player or NPC present in this place. After he gave the steel door a few knocks, a gap cracked open. "Oh, it's you," Celiora mumbled. She then opened the door and said, "Come in." At this moment, Celiora had a sleepy look on her face. She had on a tight, black leather shirt and short, black leather pants. Not only was her appearance extremely sexy, but she also looked like a lazy kitten that had not gotten enough sleep. To the ordinary male, her demeanor was pure temptation. Even Fire Dance was mesmerized by Celiora, her eyes fixed on the Grandmaster Forger's body. Fire Dance! Fire Dance! After entering the house, Shifeng discovered that Fire Dance still hadn't moved. And even after he called out to her twice, she remained dazed. Shifeng could not help but shake his head and laugh at this scene. Celiora was a rose in the forging world. A countless number of young males had tried courting her before, including the Prince of an Empire. One could see just how amazing Celiora was. However, Celiora's attractiveness lay not just in her appearance. There was also her temperament. Looks-wise, Celiora was only on par with Gentle Snow, whereas figure-wise, she was on par with Zhao Yueru. Generally speaking, Celiora's appearance was not enough to seduce a great beauty like Fire Dance. Celiora had only managed to captivate Fire Dance due to her unique temperament. If Shifeng were still the young sapling that he had been back then, Celiora would have most likely sucked out his soul already. Unfortunately, Shifeng was no longer the same as before. His willpower had long since grown to surpass ordinary people's. He quickly flicked Fire Dance's forehead. "Guild leader." Fire Dance covered her reddened forehead with her hands, confused about Shifeng's actions. "The fact that Celiora mesmerized you shows that your training is deficient. After we return, we'll need to make sure you properly cultivate your willpower," Shifeng explained slowly. "Fortunately, the one you encountered right now is Celiora. If you were to encounter Medusa, you would have most likely been petrified by now." Medusa was one of God's domain's 10 great beauties. She was also one of the legendary figures in God's domain. Even without using any skills, Medusa could make countless expert players surrender themselves to her, regardless of gender. Fire Dance nodded wordlessly. Inwardly, however, she was very curious as to why Celiora would suddenly enthrall her. Being mesmerized is not a problem. The great characters and powerful monsters in God's domain have already reached an extremely high level of mental strength. Even without doing anything, they can affect a player's mental state. This is your first time encountering a great character like Celiora, so your reaction is very normal, Shifeng explained. In truth, with Fire Dance's mental strength and willpower, Celiora should not have been able to mesmerize her so easily. Only, the current Celiora was no longer the Celiora Shifeng had known in the past. Instead, she was now a Grandmaster Forger. Through normal identification, Chiffon could see only Celiora's name. Both her level and tier were in question marks. Even after utilizing omniscient eyes, the only additional information Chiffon managed to obtain was Celiora's level and class. Celiora, human, Grandmaster Forger. Level 200. HP. Speak. Why have you come looking for me? Celiora asked as she tidied up her forging materials. If it were any other player, Celiora would have most likely chased them away by now. However, Chiffon was the player who had helped her become a Grandmaster Forger. Hence, he received better treatment from her. I wish to have this weapon repaired, Chiffon said. He then took out 1,000 transformations from his bag. With just a single glance, Celiora's eyes immediately widened when she saw the broken sword. The flawed weapon 1,000 transformations. This is great. With this, I can finally complete the weapon I designed before. Celiora instantly appeared in front of Chiffon and snatched 1,000 transformations out of his hands, her eyes flashing with excitement. Chapter 763 Legendary Quality. Chapter 763 Legendary Quality. Before Chiffon could even react, 1,000 transformations was already in Celiora's hand. There, 1,000 transformations underwent massive changes. The mana in their surroundings suddenly began surging towards the flawed weapon. In Celiora's hand, 1,000 transformations seemed as if it were alive. Is this the ability of a Grandmaster Forger? Chiffon was surprised. Chiffon had encountered other Grandmaster Forgers in the past. However, these Grandmasters would never display their abilities before commoners like himself. Hence, this was his first time witnessing a Grandmaster Forger's ability on display. A forger made weapons and equipment. Their understanding of weapons and equipment was most likely much greater than that of the users themselves. Despite this clearly being Celiora's first time wielding 1,000 transformations, Chiffon could sense that her compatibility rate with the flawed weapon was at an extremely frightening level. If the Abyssal Blade could display 80% of its true power while in Chiffon's hand, then 1,000 transformations could display 120% of its true power while in Celiora's. This scene fascinated Fire Dance too. 1,000 transformations was a short sword. Even though Celiora was clearly not an assassin, 1,000 transformations seemed more like a living being rather than an inanimate object as she wielded it. When Celiora gave 1,000 transformations a few casual swings, the flawed weapon sent ripples through space. Despite having already lost most of its power, 1,000 transformations still managed to tear through the space within the house, leaving behind numerous pitch-black spatial rifts. Even with Killing Ray, Chiffon's swings could never achieve such a standard. In the next moment, Fire Dance suddenly unsheathed the true fire blades that hung at her waist, brandishing them. As she swung the weapons, her body movements contained not a single bit of excess motion. The speed of the true fire blades suddenly increased sharply, Fire Dance's attack speed accelerating significantly. Moreover, her attacks were no longer as rigid as before. They now seemed much more relaxed. What? Chiffon was thunderstruck. Fire Dance had only watched Celiora do a few swings, yet she actually managed to break through the final barrier and officially set foot into the realm of top-tier experts. Her power of comprehension was simply too frightening. So this is the refinement realm. No wonder I never could win against Guild Leader. There was actually such a large gap between us. Fire Dance was still reliving the pleasure she felt just now as she looked at the true fire blades in her hands. Chiffon sighed with emotion at seeing Fire Dance officially enter the realms of refinement. He had spent many years before managing to set foot into the refinement realm. On the other hand, Fire Dance had succeeded in less than 2 months after coming into contact with God's domain. Her talent was simply extraordinary. Although some luck was involved in her achievement, luck was also a part of a person's strength. If it were anybody else, they probably couldn't set foot into this realm within such a short time. Now, Zero Wing finally had its second refinement expert. This would have an immense impact on Zero Wing's combat power. As soon as Fire Dance reached level 40, she would be able to equip both the Petrified Thorn and 1,000 transformations. At that time, even if Chiffon was not around, Zero Wing would still be in existence that everyone would fear in Starmoon Kingdom. It would be great if Violet Cloud can set foot into the realms of refinement as well. Shifeng was not particularly sure how far Fire Dance could reach in the future. With Violet Cloud, however, Shifeng knew very clearly just how great a potential she had. Tier 6 God-ranked players were peak existences in God's domain. Not to mention a Tier 6 God-ranked player, if a first-rate guild managed to produce even one Tier 5 player, the guild would celebrate and hold feasts for days. In the past, after a decade of development in God's domain, the gap between first-rate guilds became extremely massive. Take Ouroboros for example. Even after 10 years had passed, the guild had not boasted a single Tier 6 God-ranked member, though there were quite a few Tier 5 players in the guild. As a result, Ouroboros was only middling among first-rate guilds. However, a first-rate guild that had a Tier 6 God-ranked member would be considered top-tier among first-rate guilds even if the entire guild had only one Tier 6 God-ranked player and no Tier 5 experts. Meanwhile, due to Aqua Rose and her mage god friend, Unyielding Ice, Twilight Echo, which had similarly been a first-rate guild, succeeded in developing into a super first-rate guild back then, only a short distance away from becoming a super guild. This potential was the amazing part about Tier 6 God-ranked experts. As long as Violet Cloud and Aqua Rose continued striving, it was only a matter of time before the both of them set foot into the realms of refinement. After Celiora finished toying around with 1,000 transformations, she turned to Shifeng and asked, "Are you trying to get this short sword repaired?" "MHM. I've already prepared the materials needed to repair it." Saying so, Shifeng took out the 100 mana stones from his bag. "As your friend, I don't recommend you repair this sword," Celiora said seriously. "Although I am not sure what managed to destroy a flawed weapon like this, and although the divine runes engraved on 1,000 transformations are still mostly intact, this sword is already dead. Even if you repair it, the weapon won't be able to display its original strength. After all, flawed weapons are essentially failed products. I still wish to have it repaired. A damaged flawed weapon is still not bad." Shifeng naturally knew about the problem plaguing 1,000 transformations. This problem was the reason why Feather had switched out 1,000 transformations for a better weapon back then. However, 1,000 transformations was not an ordinary epic weapon. Even if it could not recover its peak state, it would still be significantly stronger than an ordinary epic weapon. "I'm not finished speaking. If you were to bring this thing to anybody else, they would repair 1,000 transformations and leave you with a barely usable weapon at most. However, after researching the broken steel set equipment forging design you left with me last time, I received plenty of inspiration and produced several weapons, gaining tremendous experience. The famed smith that made 1,000 transformations originally intended it to be a legendary weapon. However, due to some error in the forging process, the final result was unsatisfactory. Even so, the raw materials used to make 1,000 transformations were extremely precious legendary ranked materials. As long as I recast it, it might end up becoming a true legendary weapon," Celiora said proudly. "Recast into a legendary weapon?" Shifeng was stunned. He never imagined that Celiora actually possessed such remarkable capabilities. Legendary weapons were weapons that only famed smiths and craftsman forgers could produce. The probability of a Grandmaster forger producing one was abysmally low. After playing God's Domain for over a decade, Shifeng had never once heard of a Grandmaster forger successfully producing a legendary weapon. "That's right. Of course, there are some risks as well. If the recasting fails, the weapon will naturally end up scrapped," Celiora said sternly. "What is the success rate?" Shifeng asked. Roughly 20%. How about it? Pretty high, right? An epic weapon has a 20% chance to become a legendary weapon. This is a trade that you'll never be able to find anywhere else, Celiora said as she puffed her chest out proudly. "I'll stick with repairing it," Shifeng said definitively. What a joke. Only a 20% chance of success meant an 80% chance of failure. If it were 3 or 5 years later, not to mention 20%, even if there was only a 5% chance, he would willingly take the gamble. Now, however, he could not afford to do so. Currently, the value of an epic weapon was in no way inferior to a legendary weapon. How could he possibly let Celiora turn one into scrap metal? Chapter 764, Epic Hidden Quest. Chapter 764, Epic Hidden Quest. Don't be in such a rush. I'm still not done speaking. Celeora wagged her finger at Shifeng as if she'd guessed his thoughts. Laughing softly, she added, although there is only a 20% chance for it to become a legendary weapon, that doesn't mean that the other 80% will be a failure. What do you mean? Shifeng asked uncertainly. Fire Dance didn't understand Celeora's words, either. I've already said that the materials used to produce 1,000 transformations are very high quality, but because of some small defects, it did not become a legendary weapon. If I recast it, then there is a 20% chance it will evolve into a legendary weapon, as well as a 50% chance it will become a fragmented legendary weapon but never an actual legendary weapon. As for the remaining 30%, the recasting will end up a complete failure, and 1,000 transformations will turn into scrap metal, Celeora explained slowly. Now you should understand what I'm trying to say, right? Are you sure you are fine with just repairing it? Shifeng and Fire Dance were both stunned for a long time. Really? Shifeng sought further confirmation, thinking that he had heard wrong earlier. Not to mention upgrading 1,000 transformations into a legendary weapon, just turning it into a fragmented legendary weapon was already an unbelievable notion. Currently, the various large guilds and major powers in God's domain were frantically searching for traces of epic weapons. Who knew whether they could even obtain one? Fragmented legendary items were practically godly weapons to players right now. It was just like the heavenly dragon's breath he had obtained, which could raise his personal combat power by a large margin. However, the heavenly dragon's breath was only a ring. If it were a weapon, the improvement it could bring him would be dreadfully high. Legendary items could give players the ability to challenge opponents of a higher tier. Tier 1 could go up against Tier 2, Tier 2 against Tier 3, and Tier 3 against Tier 4. Meanwhile, a fragmented legendary item might not allow players to challenge opponents one tier higher than themselves, but it would still increase a player's strength by a large margin. Although Fire Dance was already in the refinement realm and she possessed combat power at the peak of Tier 1, she was still no match for a Lord-ranked monster of the same level at the moment. The purpose of combat techniques was to give players the ability to exert their own combat power. Take an ordinary player for example. Even if said ordinary player were fully geared in top-tier equipment and their system combat power value was at 1,000 points, so long as their combat techniques only allowed them to exert 20% of their combat power, then their actual combat power value was only 200 points. On the other hand, expert players could bring out more of their combat power in battle. An expert player who could exert 50% of their combat power in battle would have 300 points in actual combat power value when wearing shabby equipment and having a system combat power value of only 600 points. However, a person's combat power was only half of what determined a battle's outcome. The other half was external environmental factors. Ordinary players failed to exploit their surroundings. Expert players, on the other hand, were adept at using the environment to their advantage. This knack was another major difference between ordinary players and expert players. Should an ordinary player and an expert player of the same level fight against each other, the outcome of the battle was self-evident. Even if the expert player had poorer equipment, the victory would still belong to the expert player. Fire Dance's normal combat power was only at the peak of Tier 1. In a situation where she lacked any advantage in environmental factors or any special skills or tools, a frontal clash with a lord of the same level would only end in her loss. After all, Fire Dance's limit was the peak of Tier 1. Even if she could exert 100% of her combat power, defeating a Lord-ranked monster, which was equivalent to a Tier 2 class, would be impossible for her. However, as long as Fire Dance equipped a fragmented legendary weapon, she would immediately gain the combat power of a Tier 2 class. She would then be capable of soloing a Lord. What's your decision now? Celeora asked with a smile on her face. Since there's a 50% chance for it to become a fragmented legendary weapon, let's recast it, then. After giving it some thought, Shifeng still decided to gamble. Not only was there a 50% chance to upgrade 1,000 transformations into a fragmented legendary weapon, but there was even a 20% possibility for the flawed weapon to become a true legendary weapon. Moreover, Although epic weapons were currently extremely precious and could improve a player's combat power considerably, an epic weapon would not provide Fire Dance with the combat power she needed to go up against a lord even if she wielded two epic weapons. Without the Heavenly Dragon's Breath, Shifeng's combat power would directly decrease by at least 40%. In such a case, he would not last even a single exchange with Sky of the Flower of Seven Sins. Such was the strength of fragmented legendary items. If Fire Dance could obtain one herself, rather than improvement, her strength would undergo a metamorphosis. If 1,000 transformations became a legendary item, once Fire Dance equipped it, her strength would most likely surpass even Shifeng's. Since you've already decided, then go prepare the materials. Celiora nodded. Sure enough, the game won't give away a fragmented legendary weapon so easily. Shifeng smiled bitterly. God's domain was particular about fairness. Gains and losses came in equal proportion. No matter how Shifeng thought about it, it was simply impossible for him to turn the broken sword he had casually picked up into a fragmented legendary weapon for no cost whatsoever. The mana stones should be sufficient already. However, it is extremely difficult to melt down legendary ranked materials. Although I have some of the materials I need here at my place, after conducting my previous few experiments, I've already used up all of my Inferno gold. Go and collect 10 more pieces of it for me, Celiora said, smiling. Her eyes gleamed as if she saw a rich tycoon when she looked at Shifeng. System: Epic Hidden Quest recast 1,000 transformations accepted. Quest content: collect 10 pieces of Inferno gold. Quest reward: Celiora will recast the flawed weapon 1,000 transformations for you. 10 pieces of Inferno gold? Does it have to be this vicious? Shifeng felt his stomach aching when he heard the system notification. Guild leader, I've just checked, but there's no mention of Inferno gold on either the official forums or our guild's database. Where are we supposed to find this thing? Wanting to share some of Shifeng's burden, Fire Dance had searched through Zero Wing's database for Inferno gold. However, she came away empty-handed. God's domain had an extremely enormous amount of information for players to process. However, aside from basic information, the official game developers did not provide players with anything else. Players had to depend on themselves to search for the information they wanted through the libraries, ruins, and other such places. For convenience, the various large guilds had tasked individuals to collect information in the game after entering God's domain and compile it into a single database. The upper echelons of guilds could then search this database for the information they wanted. After Shifeng established Zero Wing, the guild naturally had tasked certain members with collecting all sorts of information and integrating it into the guild database. This was also the reason why players always crowded the entrance of libraries. Most of these players were not suited to battle but were suited to information gathering. They would also often visit the libraries of various cities to collect information, because the information stored in libraries were not uniform, with some libraries having information that other libraries did not. Only Zero Wing's members could access its database. However, the level of information available to them would also differ depending on the individual's rank within the guild. For example, as the commander of Zero Wing's main force, Fire Dance had first-level authority to the guild database, which was beneath only Shifeng's top-level authority. Chapter 765, Grinding Field Bosses. Chapter 765, Grinding Field Bosses. Shifeng simply chuckled in response to Fire Dance's worries. Inferno Gold was beyond current players. Only Master Forgers or better could use Inferno Gold. It was used specifically to melt materials, particularly extremely rare materials such as those of epic or legendary rank. A single ingot was worth as much as an epic item as it was a necessary component in crafting epic and legendary items. In his previous life, Shifeng had often led teams to farm Inferno Gold. However, Inferno Gold was hard to find, and they had never managed to collect much at all. Only field bosses has a chance to drop the ingots. Moreover, the bosses had to be level 50 Great Lords or above. Level 50 Field Great Lords were extremely rare in God's domain. These monsters were walking treasure troves, so guilds with sufficient strength would dispatch their forces to kill these great lords upon encountering or receiving information on one. Meanwhile, Field Great Lord's Inferno gold drop rate was not particularly high, averaging around 3%. Because Master Forgers needed the ingots to produce epic weapons, Inferno Gold's market price had only increased as time passed in the past. Scanning through Zero Wing's current database, it was natural that Fire Dance had not discovered anything regarding the valuable metal. She would find less than nothing if she scanned the internet. I need to find time to update the guild's database. Fire Dance's question had reminded Shifeng. In God's domain, players who joined guilds would have access to three main benefits: expert nurturing, the guild warehouse, and the guild's database. These benefits were also the three main criteria most independent players based their decisions on when choosing a guild. Needless to say, any guild that wished to grow stronger needed its own experts. However, it was extremely difficult to develop experts. Ordinary guilds would not have the necessary means, only first-rate guilds and above had the appropriate environment. After all, the task that required a lot of manpower and resources. It was as costly as the upkeep of an entire first-rate guild. Second-rate guilds' backgrounds weren't strong enough. Although second-rate guilds received financial support from corporations as well, they received far less funding than first-rate guilds. Maintaining normal operations already taxed their budgets. Second-rate guilds never had enough time or money to nurture experts. This was also the reason why there was such a massive gap between first-rate and second-rate guilds. Meanwhile, a guild's warehouse allowed members easy access to the equipment and items they needed. Unlike independent players, guild players did not need to purchase items from auction houses or trading firms. Usually, a guild warehouse also offered a wider array of items. A guild's database was even more valuable to players. Generally, players needed to look for clues regarding the whereabouts of quest-related items themselves, which required a lot of time. Fortunately, guilds usually had players who specialized in collecting such information. Guild members could easily obtain the information they needed by accessing the guild's database, saving precious time. This was one of the reasons that guild players leveled up much faster than independent players. Veteran guilds in the virtual gaming world would strike at these three factors when entering a new game. Hence, many players preferred joining well-known, long-standing guilds. However, there were differences between each guild's information. Moreover, collecting and registering information was not easy as it had to be transcribed in the guild's database by hand. Meanwhile, every library in God's domain contained an overwhelming amount of information. Transcribing it all into the guild's database was a vast project that needed a lot of manpower. Although Aqua Rose had invested a lot of effort into developing Zero Wing's database, at the end of the day, Zero Wing was merely an upstart guild that had only recently established. Naturally, it could not compete with other large guilds in terms of resources. Hence, its database was inferior to those long-standing guilds that had spread their roots throughout God's domain. Knowledge is power was a suitable term in God's domain. If Zero Wing's current database had even half of the information Shadow had 10 years ago, Zero Wing's strength would soar. Although Shifeng could not remember every shred of information Shadow had collected, he remembered how to acquire a few hidden quests and rare materials. If he recorded this information in the guild's database, it would be a massive help to Zero Wing's upper echelons and the Candlelight trading firm. Moreover, thanks to his Demon Hunter title, Shifeng was a world noble. He could easily visit the libraries of various major cities without needing to complete quests and grind for reputation. He could also take others with him into a library. With this, Zero Wing could send at least one person to every library in God's domain. The guild would be able to gather information even faster than a first-rate guild. It wouldn't be long before Zero Wing surpassed their first-rate neighbors. While Shifeng pondered, his system communicator rang. Phoenix Rain, who had not reached out to him for quite some time, waited for him to accept the call. Guild leader Black Flame, congratulations on your victory in the Stoneclaw Mountains. With this, you have stabilized Zero Wing's position in Stone Forest Town. Really though, you are full of surprises. You actually managed to join the top 100 on the God's Domain experts list. I doubt that there is any major power in God's domain that hasn't heard of you now, Phoenix Rain said, chuckling. May I know what business you have with me? Shifeng did not think that Phoenix Rain had called him just to congratulate him. It's nothing urgent. Your first opponent for the Dark Arena has been decided, so I've called to notify you. Phoenix Rain revealed a charming smile that could melt one's heart. The fight will be in 3 days. The venue is in the Fire Dragon Empire's imperial capital. Don't be late. I'm eager to earn some money off of you. Who's our opponent? Shifeng asked. I nearly forgot. It's a battle team called Glorious Lions. Everlasting War is their leader. This battle team has already won twice in a row, so it is very strong. I'll send you the information we have on them in a moment, Phoenix Rain said before disconnecting the call. Everlasting War is my opponent. Shifeng could not help his smile when he heard this name. He had originally planned to join the Glorious Lions battle team. He had never imagined that they would be his opponents. Immediately, he turned to Fire Dance. Fire, contact the main force members and have them gather in Star Moon City. Tell them to bring all of the barrier crystals and 9-star polar domain magic scrolls we have left. We're going to grind bosses. Currently, the various large guilds were either busy in the Stoneclaw Mountains or team dungeons, so they were not particularly focused on hunting field bosses, not to mention level 50 field great lords. Guilds typically avoided such bosses like the plague. With the strength of Zero Wing's main force, killing a level 50 field great lord was practically a dream. Fortunately, they had the 9-star polar domain magic array. Shifeng could think of a few level 50 field great lords they could test their strength on. Previously, to avoid the Flower of Seven Sins' assassins, Zero Wing's main force had taken a break from leveling, hiding safely in the city. Hence, their levels were not particularly high. There were no level restrictions or strength suppression in the Dark Arena. Even a difference of 1 level could lead to a huge difference in attributes. Zero Wing was at a disadvantage. Hence, he needed to raise everyone's levels as quickly as possible. By killing these bosses, not only could he farm for Inferno Gold, but he could also help his team level up, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Understood. I'll notify them right away. Everyone will be excited to hear this. Fire Dance burst with energy. It had been a very long time since Shifeng had taken them along to kill bosses. Moreover, after breaking through into the refinement realm, her strength had improved significantly. She could use these bosses to get used to her new strength. Chapter 766 Azura Battle Team. Chapter 766 Azura Battle Team. Beast Empire, Beast City. As the imperial capital of an empire, Beast City was far more prosperous than Star Moon City. Moreover, its territory was vast. It ranked near the top, even among the many empires on the continent of God's domain. Beast City's player population alone exceeded 10 million. The city had even more elite and expert players than White River City and Star Moon City combined. Although there were 5 first-rate guilds in Beast City, the imperial capital's true ruler was the super guild Battle Wolves. All 5 of these first-rate guilds submitted to Battle Wolves' rules. They were only allowed to develop in Beast City after signing an agreement with the Super Guild. Otherwise, the massive guild would have chased them out of the city long ago. Inside Battle Wolves' guild residence. Leader, our opponent for the next match has been decided. Here is a list of their names and the information we have gathered. The vice leader of the Glorious Lions battle team, Journey Leave, reported as he approached Everlasting War. The report Journey Leave held was very thin as the folder only contained a single sheet of paper. Many of the battle team's members in the meeting room were confused. Vice Leader, you couldn't have brought the wrong report, right? Why is there only 1 sheet of paper? Don't we usually have a stack for each team? The other members asked curiously. Journey Leave's report regarding the previous 2 battle teams they had faced had taken them nearly 3 days to analyze, yet their vice leader held only a single sheet this time. No matter how they looked at it, that did not seem like their usual reports. This isn't a mistake. The battle team we're facing this time has only recently joined the Dark Arena. This will be their debut match, Journey Leave confirmed. When he had received the report, he, too, had his doubts. However, the intelligence department had confirmed that there was nothing wrong with the report, stating that their opponent was a new battle team. Aside from the battle team's leader, there was no information on any of the team's members. A new battle team. Everlasting War's curiosity grew. He had not expected a new battle team to boldly challenge the Glorious Lions. It seems that the battle team's employer is confident of their team. In any case, we should be careful. Journey, give us a general introduction. Journey Leave nodded. He then opened the report on the meeting table and displayed it before his team members. This battle team is a new one, so, aside from some basic data on the registered team leader, we haven't uncovered any information. As of now, the other members have not been registered yet, and we have nothing on them. The battle team is called Azura, and it's led by Yifeng. I researched this team leader myself. When God's Domain launched, he was relatively famous. He had once defeated a large guild by himself, so he is very powerful. However, it has been a very long time since anyone has seen him. Even when I went to the secret pavilion to research him, I left empty-handed. He is a complete mystery. As for his exact strength right now, that is also unknown. Journey Leave then played Shifeng's battle video for everyone to watch. However, this battle video had been recorded before everyone had reached the cities. In the video, Yifeng killed dozens of players by himself while inside the town. Although Phoenix Rain had given Shifeng full authority over the battle team, he had no intention of participating in the Dark Arena as Black Flame. Black Flame was a guild leader. Having a guild leader of a large guild participate in a brawl would only make him a laughingstock. Hence, Shifeng intended to use his true identity in the Dark Arena. What kind of report is this? Is this a joke? Doesn't this mean that, aside from the battle team and the team leader's name, we know absolutely nothing? What is our intelligence department doing? How old is this battle video? Yifeng hadn't even reached level 10 yet. Mainstream players are already reaching level 30. Don't we have anything current on him? The battle team's members demanded answers, one after another. There was a massive gap between level 10 and level 30. The battle video could not be used as any kind of reference. Journey Leave shook his head helplessly. He had also investigated Yifeng. However, there was nothing to find. It was as if all traces of Yifeng had vanished from God's Domain. While everyone complained, Everlasting War sat back in a daze. Why is he the Azura battle team's team leader? Everlasting War had tried to invite Shifeng multiple times, hoping to recruit him as the Glorious Lions vice leader. Unfortunately, Hua Choshire, the representative of the corporation backing the battle team, was adamant in modifying the contract and restricting the battle team's freedom. The result was Shifeng's rejection. Everlasting War had felt Shifeng's strength personally. Although he had never exchanged moves with the young swordsman, he knew that Shifeng was a refinement realm expert. Shifeng could even emit an intense pressure. Experts in the refinement realm were extremely rare in God's Domain. Most of these experts were relatively old. They weren't usually interested in such competitions. Thus, refinement realm experts were relatively rare even in the Dark Arena. Leader, do you know him? The other team members asked curiously. Yes. Originally, Yifeng was supposed to participate in the last audition. However, due to complications, he did not take part. I had never imagined that he would lead the Azura battle team. Now, we have to face him, Everlasting War said disappointedly. His strength is the real deal. Although he is keeping a low profile, I suspect that he's a refinement realm expert. As for his weapons and equipment, it's been a long time since I've seen him. Even I am not sure how strong he has become. At this moment, Hua Choshire, who sat at the head of the table, wore a twisted expression. Although she had forgotten about a minor character like Shifeng, Everlasting War had reminded her. The minor character that she had forgotten had become a leader of a battle team. Furthermore, his battle team was going to face her own. If the Azura battle team won against the Glorious Lions, the other major corporations would take advantage of her humiliation. Seeing Hua Choshire's reaction, everyone quickly realized the severity of the situation. Back when the Glorious Lions had held its auditions, Hua Choshire had decided to change the battle team's requirements, restricting the team members' freedom. In reality, however, they had not lost much. Take Everlasting War for example. His restrictions were minimal. Leader, you're not the same player that you were before. This is just a brat in the refinement realm. After all of your special training, this will be child's play, a team member joked. However, this joke was also true. The Super Guild Battle Wolves supported their battle team. Since they had begun participating in the Dark Arena, they had gained access to various resources. They didn't need to worry about top-tier weapons and equipment at all. They had even less worry about obtaining skills. As for leveling up, they had a group of players who helped them gain levels rapidly. It was heaven. They only needed to improve on their combat techniques, thinking of ways to exert more of their strength. They could also spar and receive guidance from the Super Guild's older generation. In the real world, they also received guidance from martial arts masters on a daily basis. Ever since joining the Glorious Lions battle team, their strengths had improved by leaps and bounds. After 2 matches, the Glorious Lions battle team had earned quite a bit of fame in the Dark Arena. It would be a piece of cake to deal with a new battle team. Everlasting, for the upcoming competition, I only have one demand. You must annihilate the Azura battle team. You cannot go easy on them just because you know Yi Feng. Hua Choshire interjected as she turned to Everlasting War, her voice soft but commanding. I will always fight to my limits, regardless of my opponent. Please rest assured, Director Hua. Everlasting War could guess what was going through Hua Choshire's mind. However, he wouldn't go easy on an opponent just because they were acquainted. The Dark Arena was his battlefield. On a battlefield, he would not show any enemy mercy. Hearing Everlasting War's assurance, Hua Choshire nodded in satisfaction. Campbell Volcano. After Shifeng finished dealing with his matters, he led Zero Wing's main force to Campbell Volcano in search of level 50 Great Lords. Guild leader, I've found the boss. Minor Wind shouted in the team chat. Chapter 767, Godly Skill for Grinding Monsters. Chapter 767, Godly Skill for Grinding Monsters. Alright, everyone gather over there. Shifeng commanded through the team chat. Campbell Volcano was a level 40 to level 50 regional map in Starmoon Kingdom and was famed for dropping fire resistance equipment. However, the Campbell Volcano's environment was extremely severe. Not only did the scorching temperatures increase the burden on players' stamina significantly, but players also had to deal with a debuff. High temperature environment. All of your basic attributes have been decreased by 10%, flame damage received increased by 20%, and HP recovery rate decreased by 50%. The monsters in Campbell Volcano's map all used fire-type skills. Some monsters even dealt flame damage with their basic attacks. Due to the severe environment, even common monsters were challenging opponents, not to mention the elite and boss monsters. In the future, however, Campbell Volcano would become a favored destination. Many workshops would grind here for fire resistance equipment, earning a fortune. However, God's Domain's mainstream players had not yet reached level 30, so ordinary players could not survive here. Guild players were even less likely to visit this map. This was primarily due to the 2 main field bosses that wandered about Campbell Volcano. Both bosses were level 50 Great Lords, and they would turn any player that ventured into Campbell Volcano to level up into a charred corpse. Guild leader, that's the boss, Minor Wind said as he pointed towards the massive bear sleeping in the magma-filled valley. Violent Flame Bear, Elemental Being, Great Lord. Level 50. HP 63 0000063 0000000. Its HP is insane, Blackie gulped. This was the first time he had seen a boss with such a high HP. How long would they have to spend to grind this boss down? The Violent Flame Bear was a level 50 Great Lord. Depending on the boss's defense, after including the damage reduction due to the level suppression, their damage output would drop by at least 50%. Its HP isn't the only challenge. Don't forget about its environment. Look, we are surrounded by magma. If we accidentally touch the magma, the entire team will be in danger. Fire Dance quickly noticed that there were too few footholds for them to stand on. There was no way their MTS could dodge the Flame Bear's attacks properly. A level 50 Great Lord's attack power would definitely be astonishing. If their MTS did not have enough space to avoid attacks. With Fire Dance's reminder, the team realized the crux of the problem. The Great Lord was already absurdly strong. If it could use skills that utilized the surrounding magma, they would not be surprised if they team-wiped. Without extremely high fire resistance, the magma would reduce them to ashes in less than 3 seconds. Fear ripped through the team as they were suddenly paralyzed. Cola, Yi Wumian, stand where the magma intersects. Everyone else, wait along the sides of the valley's entrance. I'll lure the boss. Shifeng could not help but laugh at his team's response. If they threw themselves into battle, they would never defeat a level 50 Great Lord. It was especially true for the violent Flame Bear. Due to the high-temperature environment, the Flame Bear could even instant-kill a well-equipped level 50 MT normally. Only Tier 2 MTS could survive the Great Lord's attacks. In addition, the violent Flame Bear also had the team-wiping skill Earth Fury. When activated, the Great Lord would execute an earth-shaking stomp. Although the skill's damage was not particularly high, the stomp would create a magma tsunami that would devour all enemies within a 50-yard radius. Even Shifeng, with his high fire resistance, would lose 500 or 600 HP each second in the molten liquid. He'd be surprised if his teammates didn't lose 5,000 HP per second. Among Zero Wing's main force members, even Cola would only last several seconds with all of his life-saving skills active, much less everyone else. In the past, to deal with the violent Flame Bear, the various large guilds had lost hundreds of 100-man teams. These teams had consisted of level 50 and above elite players. They had been much stronger than Zero Wing's main force. Naturally, since Shifeng had chosen to raid this boss, he had a strategy to deal with it. Shifeng retrieved the Bible of Darkness and Magic Amplification Scroll. He then summoned a demon. A Tier 3 demon was the equivalent of a Great Lord. Although the Tier 3 demon Shifeng summoned would suffer the debuff and wouldn't have any environmental advantages, it could still act as a meat shield. A level 53 Tomahawk demon with 11 million HP appeared before them, stupefying Zero Wing's main force. None of them had thought that Shifeng could still summon a Tier 3 demon. A single Tier 3 demon was far more useful than 4 or 5 level 50, 100-man teams. With this demon, raiding the violent Flame Bear would be much easier. Go! Shifeng directed the Tomahawk demon to fly towards the Great Lord. When the Tomahawk demon was within 50 yards of the Flame Bear, the sleeping Great Lord discovered its presence. Suddenly, the Flame Bear opened its mouth, gathering an overwhelming surge of fire-type mana in its mouth before releasing it. Tier 2 spell, Breath of Fire. Instantly, a red beam of light lanced through the air towards the Tomahawk demon. The beam was too fast. Shifeng already struggled to control the demon. Hence, the red beam struck the Tomahawk demon, sending it plunging into the molten magma. Minus 124,084. The violent Flame Bear's damage left everyone speechless. With one move, the Flame Bear had managed to obliterate so much of the demon's HP, regardless of the fact that it had as much defense as a Great Lord of the same level. If a player had received that attack, they would die instantly. Isn't it going to instant kill us if we rush at it? Cola unconsciously gulped when he saw the demon plunge into the fiery liquid. He doubted whether he could even stop the violent Flame Bear from moving past him. However, while everyone was still in a daze, Shifeng controlled the Tomahawk demon to brandish its axe. The 5-meter-tall battle axe transformed into a stream of light and slammed into the Great Lord's body. Tier 2 skill, Axe of Destruction. Minus 84,509. Despite using a Tier 2 skill, the Tomahawk demon's attack was weaker than the violent Flame Bear's. However, Shifeng did not mind. After all, with him directing the Tomahawk demon, he exerted less than 50% of the skill's effect. He was satisfied with dealing over minus 80,000 damage. Gao. The attack had clearly inflicted pain as bloodthirst flashed in the Flame Bear's ruby eyes. Immediately, It launched itself from the magma and charged towards the tomahawk demon. Good. It took the bait. Shifeng then had the tomahawk demon rush towards the valley's entrance. Kola, Yi Wumian, get ready. When the flame bear gathers mana in its mouth, use Mock to attract its aggro and direct the bear's attack towards the intersection where you're standing. Do not let it attack elsewhere. The violent flame bear's general attacks were limited to flame claws and breath of fire. Flame claws was not an AoE attack, so the tomahawk demon could deal with it easily. Breath of fire, on the other hand, was a straight-line AoE spell. The spell contained frighteningly destructive power, and any mishap could destroy the valley's entrance. This would put the other players in danger. The tomahawk demon did not possess any aggro holding skills, so it could not control the direction of the flamebear's attack. They needed someone else to do the job. If Kola failed to attract the Great Lord's aggro, Yi Wumian could back him up. As long as the valley's entrance remained intact, the high terrain could prevent everyone from drowning in magma when the violent flamebear activated Earth Fury. With their HP, Zero Wing's main force members could easily handle Earth Fury's base damage. I understand. Kola nodded heavily. Very quickly, Shifeng lured the violent flame bear to the valley's entrance. He then directed the tomahawk demon to pin the Great Lord down. With the tomahawk demon's high attack power, no one could steal the Great Lord's aggro. Time flew by. Throughout the battle, Zero Wing's main force toyed with the violent flame bear. Whenever it opened its mouth to use its breath attack, Kola provoked it. After the breath attack, the tomahawk demon would use a tier 2 skill to redirect the Great Lord's aggro. As for everyone else, they bombarded the Great Lord with attacks without a care in the world. After all, regardless of their damage, they could not out-damage the tomahawk demon. When the violent flame bear eventually executed Earth Fury, although its attack had caused the earth to tremble, and the team members had taken plenty of damage, they still had over half of their HP after the attack. As for the resulting magma wave, it stopped growing after it engulfed the mountain's lower half. It didn't come near Zero Wing's main force. After a dozen or so minutes, Shifeng activated Divine Providence and dealt the final blow. The violent flame bear released an agonized scream as it fell to the ground. A treasure trove appeared around its body. Chapter 768, Summoning Flute. Chapter 768, Summoning Flute. In God's domain, killing a field boss for the first time would double its drop rate. Hence, large guilds loved to raid bosses on new maps. Players had yet to develop Campbell Volcano. All of its bosses were untouched. If anyone killed the bosses here, they would obtain a treasure trove. Furthermore, Shifeng had a skill like Divine Providence, which greatly increased his luck attribute. Despite level 50 and above monsters having poor drop rates, after applying the effects of Divine Providence, the violent flame bear dropped a frightening amount of loot. Not only did the Great Lord dropped over 20 items, but it had also given everyone a bounty of EXP. A level 50 Great Lord already provided an abundant sum of EXP, but after including the bonus EXP for defeating a monster of a higher level, some members even gained a full level, climbing from 32 to 33. The EXP is awesome. I gained 40% of a level after just a little over 10 minutes of hard work. If I had to level up myself, I probably wouldn't even get this much after half a day of grinding. If we continue leveling up like this, it won't be long before we reach level 40. We'll be able to buy our own mounts. Blackie could not help his excitement when he saw his experience bar. He had never thought that a field Great Lord would provide so much EXP. Even after splitting the Great Lord's EXP between 100 people, he obtained nearly half of an entire level. He was already level 33. He required a massive amount of EXP to level up. Even if he grinded and raided dungeons non-stop, it would take him at least 2 or 3 days to reach level 34. Now, however, he only needed to kill 2 more Great Lords to reach level 34. His could level faster than a rocket. Shifeng simply laughed and shook his head as he watched Blackie's reaction. His friend was too optimistic. Although it was true that field bosses provided an abundance of EXP and that they had only taken a dozen minutes or so to defeat the violent flame bear, field bosses were not common monsters. They were not easy to find. Take Campbell Mountain for example. There were only 2 great lords in this entire map. After these bosses died, it would take a day before they respawned. Then could not grind them indefinitely. Moreover, they had been able to kill this boss due to the Tier 3 demon. Without the Tier 3 demon tanking the Great Lord, with their current level and equipment, killing a level 50 Great Lord was impossible for them as they were. Guild leader, what did the boss drop? Although Cola was similarly shocked by the EXP he had received, he was more interested in the boss's loot. Hearing Cola's question, everyone redirected their attention towards the loot as well. A Great Lord ranked boss's loot was a temptation to any guild in God's domain. The loot is alright. The Flame Bear dropped 8 weapons and pieces of equipment. Among them, one is a level 50 Dark Gold ranked plate armor, one is a Dark Gold ranked 2-handed battle axe, and the rest are all Fine Gold rank. However, this flute is the most precious item among the loot. After Shifeng finished arranging the drops, he smiled as he revealed a silver flute. Players were lucky if an ordinary level 50 Great Lord dropped even 10 items. It was only due to the first kill bonus and Shifeng's high luck attribute that the Violent Flame Bear had dropped over 20. Among the items, over half were rare materials. The materials were all good quality, and even an ingot of Inferno Gold, an item with an extremely low drop rate, had dropped. They had definitely profited from this raid. However, what had surprised Shifeng the most was the appearance of the silver flute in his hands. Guild leader, what's so special about this flute? Even after examining it for a long moment, Aqua Rose could not see any peculiarities about the silver flute. The others couldn't see anything special about it either. There was only one line of text introducing this silver flute. Broken flute. If they had picked up this item during a normal hunt, they would have sold it to an NPC as garbage. You guys have heard of summoning flutes, right? Shifeng smiled faintly as he provided a hint. What? Guild leader, are you saying this is a mount? The Guardian Knight Turtledove shouted excitedly. While everyone else relied on their own feet for travel, it would be absurdly awesome if she could ride a high-ranking mount. Mounts were still out of players' reach, and it wasn't only because of their low levels. The main issue was money. Even after reaching level 40, players needed to 40 gold to purchase a steed. Even to expert players, 40 gold was astronomical. Furthermore, expert players would not be satisfied with a common mount. However, obtaining rarer mounts was extremely difficult. A guild mount also required a lot of time and resources to nurturing. Hence, riding a high-ranking mount right now was practically a dream. Everyone began drooling over the silver flute in Shifeng's hands. This flute should trigger a quest that rewards a mount. The mount should be bronze rank at the very least. It might even be mysterious iron rank. Shifeng was relatively familiar with mount quests. A mount quest generally awarded a bronze mount. However, as they had obtained this flute by killing a field boss for the first time, the mount quest might even reward a mysterious iron mount. Alright, which one of you wants it? We'll start the bidding at 50,000 GCPs. In terms of coins, 50,000 GCP was worth roughly 150 gold. A bronze mount would cost far more than just 150 gold. There was also a chance that this silver flute would yield a mysterious iron mount. If that were the case, the mount would be worth several times more. Guild leader, don't you want it? This is a high-ranking mount. Aqua Rose asked strangely. Shifeng was Zero Wings guild leader. He was their guild's face. He should be seen on the best mount they could find. Although she knew that the guild had already captured a mount, the guild stable had not been built yet. None of them could purchase a guild mount right now. Moreover, a guild mount only started out slightly stronger than a common mount. It was far from the prestige of a bronze or mysterious iron mount. I already have one, so you can fight for it. Shifeng smiled faintly. He had not told anyone that he had obtained an even better mount when he had visited the Dark Den. When everyone heard that Shifeng would not participate in the auction, their hearts pounded as they frantically shouted their bids. In just a short moment, the bidding had increased past 100,000 GCPs. However, this was only the beginning. As the main force's ordinary members reached their limits, Blackie, Fire Dance, Aqua Rose, Violet Cloud, Cola, and the other upper echelons joined the auction. 140,000, 145,000, 150,000, 220,000. As the upper echelons reached their limits, Aqua Rose shouted an offer that disappointed everyone present. Aqua Rose did not normally utilize her guild contribution points. She also often donated plenty of weapons and equipment to the guild warehouse. Hence, she had accumulated an immense amount of GCP. Her offer instantly dismissed everyone's hopes. If converted to coins, 220,000 GCPs would be worth 660 gold. If other guilds discovered that Aqua Rose had only spent 660 gold to purchase a mysterious iron mount, they would be shocked. If it were up to them, they would not hesitate to spend 1,000 gold on purchasing the mount. Following which, Shifeng handed the silver flute to Aqua Rose as envy swept through the team. Before she had even reached level 40, Aqua Rose had obtained a high-ranking mount. As soon as she reached level 40, she could travel through God's domain with ease. Alright, enough idling. Split up and search for the other great lord. Who knows? The next one might drop another mount as well, Shifeng said, laughing. Shifeng's words motivated everyone instantly as they began searching for the other great lord in Campbell Volcano. Chapter 769, Levels Rising Rapidly. Chapter 769, Levels Rising Rapidly. In the Stoneclaw Mountains. A long-abandoned city rested in a circle of mountains. Tens of thousands of corpses belonging to both players and half-orcs surrounded and littered this city. Several hundred players stood at the city's entrance. They were all out of breath and covered in fresh blood. Flame blood, revive the healers first. We'll continue after some rest, a man wearing deep blue chainmail and carrying a longbow on his back commanded. Flame blood, whose white robes had long since been stained red with blood, immediately began reviving the fallen healers. Guild leader, the respawn rate is simply too fast. We've only managed to clear out these half-orcs after so much trouble. If we don't hurry and enter now, entering the city will become far more difficult, Daybreak Fog said anxiously, a tired expression on her face. To enter this ruined city, Heaven's Burial had dispatched all of their elites, over 20,000 players. Only after several hours of fighting had they eliminated the half-orcs surrounding the ancient city. Overall, they had sacrificed over 20,000 elite players to deal with the tens of thousands of elite half-orcs, a Great Lord-ranked half-orc, and 5 High Lord-ranked half-orcs. If they did not venture into the city now, all the regret in the world would not help them when the monsters respawned. It doesn't matter. Even if they respawn, that level 45 Great Lord won't be a problem. At most, we'll have to deal with those High Lords again. If we want to complete this quest, we need to stabilize the situation outside the city. Otherwise, we'll die. Singular Burial, who was the man in the deep blue chainmail, responded calmly. We've been here for several days already. Now that success is in sight, it is important that we do not rush. As long as we complete this quest, Heaven's Burial will become Star Moon City's overlord. Both Ouroboros and the Star Alliance will have no choice but to submit. Currently, players throughout the Star Moon Kingdom and surrounding countries drooled over the Stoneclaw Mountains. These guilds watched Stone Forest Town, which was under Zero Wing's control, enviously. However, nobody knew that. The person responsible for activating the Stoneclaw Mountains was Heaven's Burial's guild leader, Singular Burial. But now that Zero Wing has stabilized its position in Stone Forest Town, it is only a matter of time before the Stoneclaw Mountains become their backyard. Will this quest really help Heaven's Burial become Star Moon City's overlord? Lightning Blade questioned doubtfully. Singular Burial had been keeping a tight lid on the quest's information. Nobody else knew what the quest would award. Based on Lightning Blade's understanding of God's domain, there shouldn't be a quest that could allow a guild to dominate over a city. Zero Wing's backyard? Singular Burial sneered. It's just the Stoneclaw Mountains. So what if we give it to Zero Wing? Since this quest is almost complete, I'll explain. Do any of you know why there are so many magic crystals in the Stoneclaw Mountains? Although other countries have their own regional dungeons that provide magic crystals, None of them are as saturated as the Stoneclaw Mountains. This ancient city is the reason. This city contains a treasure that is capable of condensing mana naturally. Hence, the Stoneclaw Mountains monsters have a much higher chance to drop magic crystals. If we can get our hands on that treasure, even without grinding monsters in the Stoneclaw Mountains, any monster we kill within a certain radius of the item will drop magic crystals. Moreover, the drop rate will be the same as it is in the Stoneclaw Mountains. Do you think I would pay so much just to clear a ruined city if not for such a treasure? When Daybreak Fog and the others heard Singular Burial's explanation, they were stunned. The monsters in the Stoneclaw Mountains were too strong. Not only were these monsters hard to kill, but they were also harder on weapons and equipment than monsters elsewhere. If monsters in other maps could also drop magic crystals with the same probability as the monsters in the Stoneclaw Mountains, they would be able to farm magic crystals much faster and more efficiently than in the regional dungeon. Moreover, it would cost less to farm elsewhere. Even if the other guilds put more effort into farming crystals in the Stoneclaw Mountains, they would be miles behind Heaven's Burial. As long as they had a sufficient stock of magic crystals, Heaven's Burial could rise to power. Alright, get some rest. We'll enter the city when we've recovered, Singular Burial commanded. While Heaven's Burial's members were preoccupied with their secret quest, the various large guilds throughout Starmoon Kingdom desperately tried to level up, getting themselves ready to challenge level 40 large-scale team dungeons. To ordinary players, level 40 was still far out of their reach. To the various large guilds, however, they would reach it soon. Level 40 could be considered a new beginning. At level 40, players could use mounts, doubling their mobility. As a result, their leveling and questing efficiency would double as well. However, purchasing a large number of mounts for its members was unrealistic for a guild. Having a guild mount was more reasonable. Hence, guilds needed to focus on constructing a stable. However, stable design's drop rates were abysmal. Only 100-man team dungeons had a somewhat higher drop rate. Hence, the various large guilds were desperately preparing to raid level 40 large-scale team dungeons in the hopes of obtaining a stable design sooner. For a time, guilds were in a frenzy to raid large-scale team dungeons. Time quickly passed. 3 days had gone by before anyone had realized it. During this period, Shifeng led Zero Wing's main force all around the kingdom, hunting for great lords. If they did not find any, then they would kill field lords and high lords until they had finally exhausted the magic amplification scroll. Shifeng had also completed his quest. All 10 Inferno gold ingots were accounted for. Meanwhile, the team had climbed in levels. Originally, the average level of Zero Wing's main force was level 33. Now, the lowest among the team was level 37. Blackie, Fire Dance, and the other upper echelons had even risen to level 38. Throughout all of God's domain, they had the highest levels. Currently, the number 1 player on Starmoon Kingdom's ranking list was only level 35. Although there was only a difference of 2 levels, the EXP gap was massive. As for Shifeng, he had reached level 39. He was only 1 step away from level 40. Unfortunately, Shifeng's magic amplification scroll was now useless. He could no longer summon a tier 3 demon to assist them in battle. Otherwise, they would have continued leveling at this speed. Aside from levels, they had also obtained a massive stock of materials and level 50 equipment. They had filled Shifeng's bag completely, transferring the overflow into Aqua Rose's bag. They had more than 40 pieces of level 50 dark gold equipment and several hundred pieces of fine gold equipment. Contrary to what they had expected, they had obtained less than 100 pieces of level 50 secret silver equipment. If they sold these items on the Blackwing auction house, it would definitely shake God's domain's major powers. Currently, while the various large guilds struggled to reach level 40, level 50 top-tier equipment was already on display. It'll be a little rushed, but fortunately, we've completed the quest. Shifeng breathed a sigh of relief as he looked at the time. He had 5 hours remaining before his appointment with Phoenix Rain. Immediately, he said through the team chat, everyone can head back to the city. Aqua, take your team to get some rest. In 3 hours, meet up in Starmoon City's teleportation hall. Chapter 770 Basic Fire Resistance Armor Kit. Chapter 770 Basic Fire Resistance Armor Kit. Starmoon Kingdom, White River City, Candlelight Trading Firm. Upon arriving at the trading firm with Fire Dance, Shifeng noticed a significant decrease in the shop's customers. "We've reached our limit already." Shifeng glanced at the players on the streets before taking another look at the situation inside the shop. Despite the Candlelight Trading Firm's location in the trade area, a high-traffic area, and the fact that this area enjoyed a growing player population, the trading firm was losing customers. This situation illustrated a lot of problems. Glancing at the street again, Shifeng noticed that several large guilds and merchant players had set up shop near the street corners. With more shops, the competition grew more intense. Although the Candlelight Trading Firm's position in White River City was still unshakable, the trading firm was losing profits. Initially, the firm could bring in over 1,000 gold every day from each shop. Now, including the shops in major cities throughout Starmoon Kingdom and other countries, the trading firm was just barely making a total profit of 1,000 gold per day. Currently, fewer and fewer hot-selling items such as whetstones and advanced whetstones, as well as various other necessities such as recovery potions and mana regeneration potions, sold each day. This was all due to the new competition. Most of these new shops had powerful backers. Furthermore, the designs for hot-selling items were becoming more common. One could easily farm them or purchase them from the auction house. As long as these shops hired some lifestyle players to produce these items and sold them at a lower price than the Candlelight Trading Firm, with a profitable location, they could easily steal plenty of the Candlelight Trading Firm's customers. Fortunately, light stones and basic strengthened armor kits still sold like hotcakes. However, Shifeng knew that this situation would not last. Neither the light stones nor the basic strengthening armor kits were unique items like the mana armor kit. As more time passed and players reached higher levels, it would become easier to obtain these items' designs. As a matter of fact, after just being away from the city for 3 days, other shops had already begun selling basic strengthened armor kits. Only, they demanded slightly higher prices than the Candlelight Trading Firm. It wouldn't be long before light stones would appear in other shops as well. At that time, the Candlelight Trading Firm would lose some of its advantages. "Guild leader, why have you called for me?" Melancholic Smile asked with a tired expression as she entered the firm's reception room. Melancholic Smile was feeling the pressure of the lost profits. Although she had thought of many solutions, none were effective enough to save them from this predicament. "How is the production of the strengthening devices coming along?" Shifeng asked. With the Candlelight Trading Firm's current income, they could never earn 150,000 gold in the next 20-some days. They needed to increase their profits. The strengthening devices were their only hope. More players flocked to White River City. Among them, there was no lack of elite and expert players. These players often ventured to high-level maps to grind. The burden on their equipment was much higher than ordinary players. Hence, they also had a much greater need for an item like the strengthening device, so that they could grind and adventure for longer periods. "So far, I've produced 400 strengthening devices. My success rate is roughly 40%. Unfortunately, our stockpile is still too small to begin selling them. We will sell out before we even begin attracting customers. I intend to put them up for sale in the trading firm once we have a stockpile of 1,000 units. Melancholic Smile was optimistic about the strengthening devices. When they began to offer the strengthening devices, the Candlelight Trading Firm would regain its popularity, increasing their daily sales tremendously. A success rate of 40%. Shifeng was slightly surprised. He had not expected Melancholic Smile to have such a high success rate. If Shifeng produced the strengthening devices himself, he'd have a 30% success rate at most. He then revealed a stack of designs and passed them to Melancholic Smile, saying, "Let Coco and the others learn these designs. If the firm has anyone with potential, you can allow them to learn one as well. Produce as many of these as you can. I have something important I need them for." Melancholic Smile was dumbfounded as she accepted the stack of designs. Strengthening device. Basic fire resistance armor kit. Melancholic Smile already knew how important the strengthening device was. Obtaining even a single design was already an amazing feat, yet Shifeng had 5 more. If they had 5 more people producing the strengthening devices, they could satisfy the demands of 1 or 2 cities worth of players. After all, the cost of forging for the strengthening device was relatively high, and the forging success rate was low. Hence, they could not offer the devices for too low a price. However, the other item, the basic fire resistance armor kit, confused her slightly. Basic fire resistance armor kit. Defense plus 120. Endurance plus 5, agility plus 3. Fire resistance plus 7. Maximum binding limit per character, 3, can only be bound to level 30 equipment or above. In terms of basic attributes, it was only slightly stronger than the basic strengthened armor kit. However, the materials it required were much rarer. The basic fire resistance armor kit would cost twice as much to produce as the basic strengthening armor kit. Would anyone really be willing to buy these? Although the fire resistance armor kit provided quite an amount of fire resistance, there were many areas in God's domain that didn't offer the danger of fire. Players didn't need to head to leveling maps or dungeons that required high fire resistance. One could say that the fire resistance armor kit was not a necessity. Even if they produced this item, not many players would be willing to purchase it. However, the fact that Shifeng viewed the basic fire resistance armor kit and the strengthening device as equally important showed that the former was just as precious. From now on, focus on forging strengthening devices and basic fire resistance armor kits. Set everything else aside. Shifeng was aware of Melancholic Smile's concerns. However, the basic fire resistance armor kit was no less valuable than the strengthening device. Although the armor kits were not useful right now, once the Eclipse Gate opened, items that provided fire and ice resistance would skyrocket in price. Only then would the fire resistance armor kits shine. With these 3 armor kits, one could gain 21 points of fire resistance. This way, players could equip fewer pieces of fire resistance equipment. Although fire resistance equipment could increase one's fire resistance, they would have to sacrifice basic attributes. Having too much of that equipment would wound a player's combat power, making it more difficult to kill monsters in the Eclipse Gate. Hence, after the various large guilds discovered the basic fire resistance armor kit, they would rush towards Campbell Volcano to farm for the design. Unfortunately, the design's drop rate was incredibly low. Moreover, they only dropped from the volcano's field bosses. Throughout these past 3 days, Shifeng had killed plenty of field bosses at Campbell Volcano with Zero Wing's main force. After 3 days of hard work, with the help of divine providence, they had obtained a total of 9 copies. Anyone else would thank their stars to obtain just 1. Right, how many materials have we collected for the stable so far? Shifeng made it clear that the guild stable was also a priority. The various large guilds were closing in on level 40. It would be a huge waste if he had the stable design but could not construct it. Chapter 771, 1000 Transformation Evolves. Chapter 771, 1000 Transformation Evolves. Hearing Shifeng's question, Melancholic Smile's expression sank, a hint of embarrassment appearing on her face. I've only managed to gather a little more than half of the required materials. We're still short 20 logs of primal emerald wood and 12 soul cultivating stones, Melancholic Smile reported honestly. Shifeng had instructed her to handle the material collection for the stable, regardless of the price, a while ago. Yet, until now, aside from the materials Zero Wings members had gathered, she had only managed to source a small fraction of the required materials. All right. I doubt we'll be able to obtain the remaining materials easily. I'll try to think of a way to collect the rest. Focus on forging the strengthening devices. Shifeng nodded. Shifeng understood just how difficult it was to find the materials they needed to construct a stable. Even in 100-man hard mode team dungeons, the drop rates for these materials were abysmally low. Only Hell mode had a slightly higher drop rate. If they had not obtained the first clear of the Frost Prison, they wouldn't have as much stock as they did right now. It was already impressive that they had over half of the materials. Moreover, the situation in God's domain had changed. The various large guilds were only a short time from the level 40 era. As long as the various large guilds did a little research, they would discover a hint to what they needed for their own stables. Primal emerald wood and soul cultivating stones were among the more obvious necessities. However, only those with stable designs would know the majority of the materials they needed. There were many kinds of rare materials that dropped in large-scale team dungeons, and they could be used in multiple designs. Even if they came across some building material that the stable design would require, the various guilds might assume it had a different purpose. However, as information on the primal emerald wood and soul cultivating stones was available in cities' libraries, it would be nearly impossible to purchase these materials from other guilds. They were usually hard to obtain. However, Shifeng was also feeling celebratory. If he had not been able to participate in the Dark Arena, searching for a way to obtain the remaining stable materials would have really given him a headache. On the surface, the Dark Arena appeared to be a secret competition between the various international corporations. In truth, however, it was a place for the various corporations to exchange precious material and items. The Dark Arena provided a method to obtain the rarer materials and items. Of course, if one wanted these items, they needed to gamble on the team battles. In the Dark Arena, credits were not the most valued resource. Rather, it was the precious materials and items of God's domain. Normally, God's domain's major powers refused to sell these rarer items. At most, they might be willing to trade for items of equal value. Meanwhile, in the Dark Arena, if one offered a fair price, they could negotiate. Once both sides agreed, they would then bet on a match of their choosing. The winner would take everything. However, the winning battle team would also earn a small portion of this bet. If the battle team did not want the offered rewards, the party that won the bet could purchase the items from the winning team with credits. This was why so many powers throughout God's domain had hungered to join the Dark Arena in the past. They hadn't just wanted the fame. They had also wanted the chance to earn endless wealth and resources in God's domain. Unfortunately, not everybody could take part in the Dark Arena. The Dark Arena had its own inner circle. Ordinary guilds were not worthy of an invitation. Take Shifeng for example. Despite being the guild leader of a second-rate guild, he needed to get the assistance of the upper echelon of a first-rate guild to gain entry into the Dark Arena. In the past, Shifeng had visited the Dark Arena over a dozen times, and he had to admit that second-rate guilds could not afford to mingle there. Even legendary items and player-constructed cities were sometimes used as bargaining chips, much less legendary ranked materials. Although each team in the Dark Arena consisted only of 10 members, the profits one could earn from a single match could inspire hundreds, even millions, of people to fight. The primal emerald wood and soul cultivating stones were precious materials. In the Dark Arena, however, these materials were considered subpar wages. Hence, it would not be difficult for Shifeng to gather the materials he needed to build his stable. After Shifeng stored the rare materials and level 50 weapons and equipment in the trading firm's warehouse, he hurriedly led Fire Dance towards Celiora's smithy. In Celiora's smithy, Shifeng handed Celiora the 10 Inferno gold ingots. Immediately, the sound of a system notification reached his ears. System, Epic Hidden Quest recast 1,000 transformations completed. Quest rewards, 200 million EXP and Fortitude +5. Suddenly, Shifeng's experience bar rose to 42% of level 39. 200 million EXP might be a lot to ordinary players, but to Shifeng, it was a drop in the bucket. Aside from the fact that he required double the EXP normal players required to level up, an ordinary level 39 player needed an astonishing amount of EXP to level. Even several hundred millions of EXP was not enough to climb from level 39 to level 40. However, the 5 fortitude points were quite valuable. If Shifeng challenged advanced quests, he would have to waste a lot of time and complete 3 or 4 to gain 5 fortitude points. After stowing away the Inferno gold with satisfaction, Celiora looked at Shifeng and asked seriously, "Now that I have everything I need, who is the weapon intended for? My companion here will use it." Shifeng tugged Fire Dance forward as he introduced her to Celiora. Since 1,000 transformations was going to be recast, A Grandmaster forger like Celiora could not recast the weapon blindly. She needed to make sure that the weapon would fit its user perfectly. Taking a look at Fire Dance, Celiora turned back to Shifeng and said, "You must think this through. The weapon I recast will not be some garbage epic weapon that you can find anywhere on the streets. It will have the possibility of becoming a legendary weapon. Are you truly willing to give that up? Even Tier 6 gods would go crazy over a legendary weapon." Celiora refused to believe that Shifeng would actually go through all that effort for the sake of a companion. "Why wouldn't I be willing?" Shifeng laughed. 1,000 transformations was a short sword. Although swordsmen could use short swords as well, they did not suit his style. On the other hand, Fire Dance was Zero Wing's #1 assassin. She could wield the 1,000 transformations to its greatest potential. Hearing Shifeng's confidence, Fire Dance's face burned with both excitement and bashfulness. With the light from the smithy's furnace, Fire Dance's normally white cheeks seemed to have been stained red. "You blockhead. Fine. It's your decision." Celiora then shifted her gaze towards Fire Dance. "You, follow me." Fire Dance nodded silently. She then followed Celiora and arrived before a silver magic array. "All you need to do is stand in the center of the magic array," Celiora instructed. Her hands then began tracing divine runes in the air. By the time Fire Dance took her place at the array's center, Celiora had already written dozens of lines of golden divine runes. Her casting speed was tremendous. Shortly after, Celiora flicked her delicate finger, and the divine runes wrapped around Fire Dance's body rapidly, enveloping her. After finishing her preparations, Celiora took out the mana stones Shifeng had readied for her and tossed them into the furnace. Suddenly, 100 mana stones hovered above the magic array, looking like stars as they circled the 1,000 transformations, which the Grandmaster Forger had placed inside the furnace. "In you go." Celiora took out the 10 Inferno gold ingots and tossed them into the furnace as well. Immediately, the crimson flames transformed into golden tongues of fire. In the next moment, the broken sword, which even killing ray could not damage, melted as they watched. When 1,000 transformations had melted completely, it transformed into multicolored globs of molten metal. "Condensate!" Celiora shouted. A multicolored magic array then enveloped the furnace and everything around it. The 100 mana stones instantly transformed into liquid and melded with the liquefied 1,000 transformations. Afterward, Celiora returned to rapidly writing divine runes and curses. The golden runes and purple curses also began to flow into the liquid metal inside the furnace. The Grandmaster Forger wrote runes for over half an hour. By the time Celiora finished, her face had paled to an unhealthy white. Meanwhile, the divine runes and curses had molded the liquefied 1,000 transformations. Celiora waved her finger. 1,000 transformations then flew out of the furnace and hovered in midair. Currently, 1,000 transformations glowed red and radiated a scorching heat. "It's finally complete." Celiora could not help but reveal an excited smile as she gazed at the newly recast 1,000 transformations. Chapter 772 Extraordinary Ability. Chapter 772 Extraordinary Ability. Due to 1,000 transformations, the temperature in the smithy had increased rapidly. Shifeng felt as if he stood in the mouth of a volcano. Despite standing 10 yards away from the flawed weapon, Shifeng received tens of damage with each passing second. If a player with low fire resistance stood in his place, they would not last 10 seconds. Fortunately, Fire Dance was cocooned deep inside the magic array. She did not receive a single point of damage from the heat. Naturally, Celiora didn't need to worry about the heat. "Stand further away." Celiora reminded Shifeng with a low command. A bottle of dark blue liquid then appeared in her hands. The instant Celiora took out this bottle, the smithy's temperature decreased significantly. Shifeng was still basking in the aftertaste of Celiora's forging process. However, upon hearing Celiora's reminder, he ran out of the smithy. Shifeng was no stranger to forgers. He was even a famous forger himself. Although Shifeng had watched master forgers work many times in the past, He had never once witnessed the forging process of a Grandmaster Forger. He had never imagined there was actually such a huge difference between a Master Forger and a Grandmaster Forger. The experience of watching Celiora work had been quite valuable. Even after 10 years, Grandmaster Forgers had still been extremely rare in God's domain. Even the guild leader of a super guild had to treat such an existence with great respect. One could imagine just how high a Grandmaster Forger's status was. Initially, Shifeng had thought that the largest difference between a Master Forger and a Grandmaster Forger was their research and understanding of materials. However, after watching Celiora work, he realized the difference wasn't just the understanding of materials. A Master Forger could never hope to compare to a Grandmaster's understanding of divine runes, curses, and magic arrays as well. It was no wonder why the Master Forgers of Shadow had never reached Grandmaster status, regardless of how hard they had tried. The strength of Grandmaster Forgers was ridiculous. Fortunately, I recorded Celiora's entire recasting process. Afterward, if I show the recording to Melancholic Smile and the others, they might have a better chance of becoming Grandmaster Forgers. Shifeng, who waited outside Celiora's house, could not help smiling. After Shifeng had left the house, Celiora opened the deep blue bottle and poured a single drop of the deep blue liquid onto the glowing 1,000 transformations. The instant the deep blue liquid connected with 1,000 transformations, the flawed weapon cooled at a visible rate. The smithy also chilled to become a frozen hell. Although the smithy looked simple, extremely powerful magic arrays strengthened the area. Nothing from the outside world could disturb the house's interior. Likewise, nothing inside the house could disturb the outside world. Hence, Shifeng, who stood outside the house, was safe. He could not even sense the drastic changes inside the house. Only after another half an hour had passed did Celiora call Shifeng back. 1,000 transformations had already cooled completely. It was finished. The flawed weapon was white as snow. The sword's blade also emitted a faint glow, looking like a star in the night sky. Despite doing nothing beyond hovering in the air, Shifeng could feel a frightening power radiating from the short sword. Was it a success? Shifeng asked curiously. If it were a success, then the moment Fire Dance equipped the weapon, her attributes would most likely surpass his by a wide margin. After all, he only had a single fragmented legendary item on his person. A complete legendary item had the power to decimate the heaven and earth. Several epic items and a fragmented legendary item could not compare. Unfortunately, Celiora shook her head in disappointment and said, "Although I've completed the runes on the sword, there are some defects in the original materials. It can only reach fragmented legendary rank. If I had the complete 1,000 transformations, it might have become a legendary weapon." Shifeng expressed his sympathy when he saw Celiora's disappointment. Every Grandmaster Forger dreamed of creating a legendary weapon of their own. Although Celiora had not been forging an entirely new weapon, only recasting one, if she succeeded, it would be of immense help towards making a legendary weapon in the future. However, he had expected this. A legendary weapon was not easily obtainable. It was not something he would stumble across after completing a single hidden epic quest. A fragmented legendary item was the limit. If he wanted to obtain a legendary weapon, he would have to complete a legendary quest at the very minimum. If Galaxy Past knew that his death had given Zero Wing an additional fragmented legendary item, he would probably die from a heart attack. Shifeng could imagine just how much effort Galaxy Past had put into obtaining 1,000 transformations. However, it had fallen into Zero Wing's hands. As for Feather, the future god-ranked assassin, Shifeng could only apologize to him. "Come, test it out," Celiora said as she turned to Fire Dance, who had been frozen in place throughout this process. Players could wield and test any weapon in God's domain. However, if they did not meet the necessary requirements, they could not use the weapon in battle. When Fire Dance grasped the hovering 1,000 transformations, she was instantly stunned. Only after a long moment did she dazedly make a few casual swings. Suddenly, a silver flash appeared in the smithy. Despite only swinging the weapon a few times, it felt as if the silver sword were present throughout the building. Moreover, only the sacred sword killing ray in Shifeng's hands could match this sword's speed. So strong. Shifeng watched the myriad of sword images that filled the space, feeling threatened. Despite being a Void Realm expert, he could not predict the 1,000 transformations' attack trajectory. He also couldn't tell which image was real and which image was just an afterimage. They all seemed real and fake at the same time. Is this the true power of 1,000 transformations? Shifeng had watched Feather's battle videos in the past. However, 1,000 transformations had not been this powerful. Although Feather's attacks with 1,000 transformations had also created numerous sword images, a refinement realm expert could, more or less, differentiate the fakes from the real deal. Meanwhile, Shifeng had already reached the Void Realm, yet, he couldn't differentiate between the sword images Fire Dance had created. Even though he could feel many of the sword images were fake and were out of sync with Fire Dance's movements, the pressure these sword images gave off felt very real to him. There is a reason why this sword was named the 1,000 Transformations. When swung, it can transform its user's attack into a myriad of forms and confuse the enemy. However, when the opponent attempts to retaliate, they will quickly discover that most of the sword images are fake. Yet, when struck by these fakes, they will receive damage. 1,000 transformations can interchange illusions with reality. It's a pity that it did not become a legendary weapon. It would have been truly magnificent, Celiora explained, smiling. As she had personally upgraded this weapon to fragmented legendary rank, she understood 1,000 transformations like the palm of her hand. How about it? Do you feel any discomfort while using it? Fire Dance was still deeply immersed in the sensation of using 1,000 transformations. Even after Celiora asked her a question, she remained unresponsive. However, judging from Fire Dance's current reaction, it was obvious that the weapon fit her like a glove. Guild leader, it feels like this weapon is a part of my body. I can even feel the blade cut across air. Fire Dance said excitedly as she wielded 1,000 transformations like a favorite toy. Of course. This is a fragmented legendary weapon Lady Celiora has personally adjusted for you. It should fit you far better than any other fragmented legendary weapon. You should feel that way, Shifeng laughed. Alright, stop playing with it for now. 1,000 transformations already belongs to you. You have all the time in the world to analyze it. Let me see its attributes. Chapter 773 Strongest Attributes. Chapter 773 Strongest Attributes. Shifeng was incredibly curious to see how powerful a fragmented legendary weapon was. There were quite a number of fragmented legendary items in God's domain. However, those who had obtained fragmented legendary items were not fools. They would not intentionally reveal their items' attributes, allowing their opponents an opportunity to guess their strength and discover weaknesses. Moreover, fragmented legendary items that belonged to large guilds were kept as guild secrets. They wouldn't even advertise owning one, much less revealing the item's attributes. Although Shifeng had been Shadow's guild leader in the past, the guild had not owned a single fragmented legendary item. On the other hand, the guild had owned quite a few epic items. However, at the end of the day, an epic weapon was only an epic weapon. It could never compare to a fragmented legendary weapon. Hearing Shifeng's request, Fire Dance lost her composure. Hurriedly, she sent Shifeng the 1,000 transformation statistics. As expected of a fragmented legendary weapon. Compared to this, an epic weapon is practically garbage. Shifeng's hands involuntarily trembled when he saw the weapon's attributes. 1,000 transformations, one-handed sword, fragmented legendary rank. Equipment requirement, strength 700, agility 700. Attack power, 200% of strength. Attack speed, 2% of agility. All attributes, increases according to user's level. When equipped, strength increased by 50%, agility increased by 60%, intelligence increased by 40%, endurance increased by 50%, attack speed increased by 50%. Ignore levels plus 20. All skills plus 3 levels. All item level requirements reduced by 10 levels. Attacks have 60% chance to trigger deadly blow, increasing damage by 220% and attack speed by 20%. 20% chance to trigger critical point effect, ignoring all block and defense effects, and dealing 330% weapon damage. Additional skill 1 dash. Phantom, when activated, summons 5 doppelgangers. The doppelgangers share attributes with the wielder. They do not have any attack power. All attacks against doppelgangers will have no effect. User can freely swap positions with any of the 5 doppelgangers without cooldown. Duration, 30 seconds. Cooldown, 1 hour. Additional skill 2 dash. True illusion, if wielder dies within 40 seconds upon activation, wielder will respawn at full HP nearby. Grants 3 seconds of invulnerability. All buffs before death will remain in effect. Cooldown, 48 hours. Additional skill 3 dash. Illusory power, increases strength by 80%, agility by 100%, and movement speed by 70%. All damage received has a 50% chance to be sent into the void. Grants immunity to all control effects. Duration, 3 minutes. Cooldown, 5 hours. Created by famed Smith Jacks. 1000 Transformations is 65th of God's Domain's 108 flawed weapons. It had lost all its power due to the blade's destruction. However, it had been recast by Grandmaster Forger Celiora. Unable to be dropped. Unable to be traded. Unable to be destroyed. User, Fire Dance. An epic weapon could never hope to compare to the 1000 Transformations attributes, much less the additional skills. This weapon was perfect for assassins. However, the most impressive aspect of 1000 Transformations was the True Illusion skill. It was even more amazing than the Full Revival skill. Even when a player revived with Full Revival, they would still have to suffer the death penalty and lose a level. Moreover, the monster they fought would leave combat due to their death. When said player challenged the same monster again, the monster would have recovered to full HP. The player would have to start the battle all over again. However, True Illusion was different. It could dismiss a player's death, allowing them to reappear with full HP without needing to lose a level. Even if one died in mid-battle against a monster, they could reappear and continue fighting immediately. In PvP, this skill was even more powerful. In ordinary duels, this skill might not be useful as the system would declare the outcome of the battle as soon as a player's HP fell to 1. In a deathmatch, however, the battle would only end after a player had died. In such a situation, True Illusion would take effect, allowing the player to reappear with full HP instantly. The system would not judge the player as the loser, and the battle would continue. With this skill, with the survivability of assassins, it would be near possible to kill Fire Dance. If one did not have the strength to instant kill Fire Dance, they would not be able to kill her at all. Moreover, 1000 Transformations was now a personal weapon. Even if others wanted the flawed weapon, they could not steal it from her. Of course, if Fire Dance obtained better equipment, 1000 Transformations would go to waste. There were both pros and cons. Can you equip it now? Shifeng asked Fire Dance, his excitement evident in his tone. If Fire Dance could equip 1000 Transformations right now, they would have a much easier time in the Dark Arena. After all, that was a team battle. An individual's strength was limited. To prevent monster-like characters from dominating the entire competition, the Dark Arena ran team battles. This way, the outcome was much harder to predict. It was also impossible for one player to carry a battle team to victory. A battle team was only likely to secure victory if the majority of the members were very powerful. If Fire Dance equipped 1000 Transformations, it would undeniably increase the Azura battle team's chances of victory. My agility is sufficient. However, I don't have enough strength. Fire Dance was similarly tempted and wished she could equip the new weapon immediately. However, the weapon demanded 700 strength, and of everyone in Zero Wing, only Shifeng had met this requirement. How far are you from the requirement? Shifeng asked. I'm short by 133 points. Fire Dance felt helpless. Unfortunately, she had placed the majority of her free attribute points into agility. Her Tier 3 gemstones were also all agility types. However, had she not focused on her agility, she wouldn't have enough for that requirement either. That's quite a lot. Shifeng frowned. If it were only several dozen points, he had some ways to make up for the gap. However, over 100 points was a little too much. Unless she could replace her equipment. Right, now that you're level 38, you should be able to equip the Petrified Thorn. Try. The Tier 1 set equipment for assassins, the Dark Melody set, could decrease the equipment requirement by 3 levels. The Petrified Thorn could only be equipped at level 40. As for the other equipment requirements, Fire Dance had fulfilled them long ago. She could equip the Petrified Thorn now. Being reminded by Shifeng, Fire Dance hurriedly replaced the subhand True Fire Blade with the Petrified Thorn. Immediately, her attributes skyrocketed. Not only did an epic weapon provided more fixed attributes, but it also increased a player's basic attributes by a fixed percentage after being equipped. Take the Petrified Thorn for example. When equipped, it would increase the wielder's strength and agility by 10%. Moreover, the True Fire Blade was only a level 30 dark gold weapon. How could it possibly compete with a level 40 epic weapon in terms of attributes? Sure enough, after Fire Dance equipped the Petrified Thorn, she was only 32 strength short of reaching 700 points. Afterward, Shifeng led Fire Dance to the Candlelight Trading Firm and had her replace some of the Tier 3 Agility gemstones with Tier 3 Strength gemstones, instantly pushing her strength to 700 points. Her agility remained above 700 as well. Test it out, Shifeng said. He could not help but laugh at Fire Dance's slightly nervous expression. MHM. Fire Dance then replaced her main weapon with 1,000 transformations. Immediately, Fire Dance's aura changed massively. The pressure Shifeng felt from her also increased tremendously. The assassin now felt like a ferocious beast that had just woken and bared its sharp fangs. Shifeng was incomparably excited to see Fire Dance's strength increase. Currently, in terms of basic attributes, Fire Dance had surpassed him. Alright, it's time to make a trip to the Fire Dragon Empire. Shifeng smiled. Chapter 774, 4 Great Empires. Chapter 774, 4 Great Empires. In one of the bars in Starmoon City's slums, a middle-aged man in silver robes turned and looked at his surroundings. After confirming that no one had followed him, he walked into the bar. Aside from the NPC barkeeper, the bar's only occupant was a white-haired youth dressed in exquisite, black leather armor. When the white-haired youth, who had been enjoying a bottle of vodka in silence, sensed the silver-robed man walk over, he turned around and smiled, saying, "You're finally here. It seems that Black Flame has put you through quite the ringer. Did you finish what I asked you to do?" The silver-robed man was none other than Sky from the Flower of Seven Sins. He was also the first Void Realm expert Shifeng had killed. Sky's position in the Flower of Seven Sins was extraordinary. He could be considered one of the organization's key figures. Normally, upon meeting, the Flower's members only felt fear and respect. They were deeply afraid of offending Sky, who had a strange personality. Yet, when speaking with this man, the white-haired youth remained calm and natural. If the other members saw this, they would definitely be shocked. As you guessed, he can steal players' immortal souls. However, I did not discover that item's presence on him. Really though, this incident has ruined me. I wasn't able to log into the game for 3 days. I've fallen behind in levels. I even lost an excellent pair of shoes. Say, how do you intend to compensate me for the losses? Sky said, annoyance clear in his tone as he glared at the gloating youth. Fine. They were just a pair of shoes. What do you think of this? The white-haired you asked, laughing. He then revealed a pair of level 35 dark gold ranked combat boots. Currently, God's Domain's mainstream players were around level 30, while its experts were level 33. Even expert players were barely reaching level 35. Yet, the white-haired youth could so easily hand Sky a pair of level 35 dark gold ranked combat boots. Even level 30 dark gold equipment was very difficult to obtain, not to mention level 35 dark gold equipment. That is more like it. Anything less and you'd fail to live up to your name, Silver. Sky, however, was not particularly surprised. He accepted the combat boots. You really are a strange one. Instead of looking for him yourself, you chose me to test his strength and learn whether or not he has that item. Isn't this just a waste of time? With your abilities, can't you find an opportunity to kill him fairly easily? You don't understand. There is only one chance to obtain that item. In the off chance that I alert him, I will lose that one opportunity. Besides, it was fortunate that I didn't join you. It would have been too difficult to kill him. He didn't bring the item with him, either. Killing him would have been useless. Silver shook his head. Laughing softly, he said, I am not in a rush, anyway. In any case, I have other places to be, as well. However, I need you to keep a close eye on him and report any movement to me. As for the reward you requested, I'll take care of it as soon as possible. However, you mustn't forget that only you and I know this information. If I find that word has gotten out, you will suffer the consequences. Sky involuntarily shivered under Silver's warning glare. Hurriedly, he replied, I understand. Silver was a true upper echelon of the Flower of Seven Sins. Throughout the organization's history, Silver was the only player to join the organization's upper echelons at such a young age. His strength and abilities were extraordinary. If he offended Silver, not only would he find it impossible to mingle in God's domain, but he would also suffer in the real world. Fire Dragon Empire, Flame Dragon Imperial City. God's domain was the home of numerous empires. The four great empires, however, towered above the rest. The Fire Dragon Empire was one of these four. The Beast Empire's imperial capital only had a player population of around 10 million. Flame Dragon City, however, had a population of over 30 million. Beast City could not compete with Flame Dragon City. At the same time, Flame Dragon City was also one of the four venues that often hosted the Dark Arena. Flame Dragon City's territory was also massive. Compared to Flame Dragon City, Star Moon City and White River City were merely small children. Currently, a large number of players had gathered in Flame Dragon City's underground arena. Every one of these players either held prominent positions in the virtual gaming world or was one of God's domain's many overlords. No one could afford to offend a single one of these players. Currently, ordinary players could not enter the underground arena as a super guild had cordoned off the area. If a player dared to cause a scene here, they would find themselves very quickly removed from God's domain. Hence, no one dared to approach without an invitation. Big Sis Rain, it's almost time, yet, those people haven't arrived yet. Should we have the others prepare for now? A charming beauty wearing luxurious, purple mage robes asked Phoenix Rain softly. We still have some time. It won't hurt to wait a little longer. If they aren't going to show up, we'll have the others take their place, Phoenix Rain said as she glanced at the charming beauty beside her. Smiling, she continued, Blue, I know you have a low opinion of Zero Wing, but Black Flame is the expert who defeated Martial Dragon. Just a while ago, he even defeated Sky from the Flower of Seven Sins. His strength is at the pinnacle of God's domain. In the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, Blue Phoenix was no less famous than Martial Dragon. She was one of the top combatants the Phoenix Pavilion had paid a large price to nurture secretly. However, due to Martial Dragon awakening his domain a step ahead of her, Blue Phoenix was weaker than Martial Dragon. Even so, she was still an expert ranking at the very top of God's domain. Originally, Phoenix Rain had intended to allow Blue Phoenix to lead the battle team, taking advantage of her strength to make a fortune. However, Black Flame's sudden appearance had changed her mind. If she had Black Flame lead the battle team instead, she had a better chance of keeping herself hidden. At the very least, nobody would connect her with this battle team. But Black Flame looks down on us. Big Sis Rain, you only obtained this battle team slot after a lot of trouble, yet they haven't shown themselves, and we're losing time before the match begins. This shows that they're not taking this seriously at all. How could someone like this fight with everything they have in the match? Blue Phoenix complained indignantly. As Phoenix Rain waited quietly for Shifeng's arrival, a woman in a set of glamorous purple robes appeared before her. This beautiful woman radiated the air of luxury. Why, if it isn't Miss Feng? I never thought that after so many years, you'd still be a measly pavilion master. If you had agreed to my brother's conditions, you wouldn't be in such a pitiful state, Exemplary Willow said, giggling. Her eyes, however, contained ridicule as she spoke. And here I wondered who had appeared before me. So it's Miss Liu too, who recently suffered a miserable defeat at the hands of an upstart guild like Zero Wing, Phoenix Rain chuckled while covering her mouth with her hand. Hearing Phoenix Rain come back, Exemplary Willow flared with anger like a cat whose tail got stepped on. Feng Qianyu, don't think that you've won just yet. Sooner or later, I'll teach you that all your efforts are for nothing. Your fate has already been determined and cannot be changed. Even the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion cannot help you. Not to mention, you're still just a measly, little pavilion master. Exemplary Willow snorted as she stomped away. After Exemplary Willow left, however, Phoenix Rain's complexion darkened slightly. Big Sis Rain, time's up. The organizer is ushering us to get ready. What should we do? Blue Phoenix asked. Chapter 775, Surekill Spell. Chapter 775, Surekill Spell. Could he have forgotten? Phoenix Rain frowned slightly. In truth, she had more confidence in her subordinates than in Black Flame. After all, she had gone to great lengths to nurture these subordinates, molding them into experts. Moreover, they wore the best equipment the Phoenix Pavilion had to offer. She had invested a lot of time and effort into this match. Even Zero Wing, a guild famed for its equipment, was unlikely to have better equipment. Immediately, Phoenix Rain called up the system interface, intending to contact Black Flame. If the man truly wasn't going to show up, then she could only send her subordinates into the match. Although there was the risk of exposing her identity, winning the match was equally important. Just as Phoenix Rain was about to click Contact Friend, Shifeng appeared in her line of sight. However, rather than his appearance of Black Flame, Shifeng wore the features of Yifeng. Hello, Phoenix Pavilion Master. I am Yifeng, the leader of the battle team guild leader Black Flame has sent, Shifeng explained slowly. Hello. May I know where your guild leader is right now? Phoenix Rain asked as she looked at Shifeng, not taking him seriously. She knew of Yifeng. In her opinion, however, this was only a trap Black Flame had set to confuse the enemy battle team. Black Flame should be the battle team's true leader rather than this young man before her. Guild leader has something important to take care of, so he delegated all responsibilities regarding the battle team to me. If Phoenix Pavilion Master has any questions, please feel free to ask. Shifeng could tell what was going through Phoenix Rain's mind. Laughing, he said, moreover, Phoenix Pavilion Master, do you really think that it is appropriate for Zero Wing's guild leader to take part in such a competition? Then, are you saying that guild leader Black Flame won't be participating in the Dark Arena at all? Phoenix Raid asked with a chilling tone, wrathful flames flaring up in her eyes. This development was unexpected. Of course. However, Phoenix Pavilion Master, please rest assured. We won't disappoint you, Shifeng said, not particularly minding Phoenix Rain's anger. Calmly, he continued, if Phoenix Pavilion Master is still unsure, you can test my strength personally. Shifeng was very curious about Phoenix Rain's current strength. In the past, countless guilds had fallen into Phoenix Rain's hands. There was even an instance where multiple Apex experts banded together to deal with Phoenix Rain, yet without exception, she defeated every one of them. Back then, the assassination attempt had boosted Phoenix Rain's prestige in God's domain. She had been given the Demon Queen title as a result. After all, not only was she a country-toppling beauty, but she also possessed an absolute strength that allowed her to step on Apex experts. Those Apex experts, who had tried to deal with Phoenix Rain, had admitted that, when they had fought Phoenix Rain, she had killed them without taking any damage at all. Those Apex experts had been to gods to Shifeng. He had only been able to look up to them. Yet, such experts hadn't been able to land a finger on Phoenix Rain, even after banding together. Phoenix Rain's strength was inconceivable. However, after that battle, Phoenix Rain had practically avoided combat. She had left all matters to Blue Phoenix to handle. As a result, Phoenix Rain's true strength remained a mystery in God's domain. At this moment, Blue Phoenix stepped forward and said, as expected of the team leader favored by guild leader Black Flame. "Since you're so confident, let me have a bout with you." Blue Phoenix was furious with Zero Wing. Black Flame had actually decided to neglect such an important match, passing all responsibility to a subordinate instead. At this point, she intended to teach Zero Wing's members a lesson and humiliating Black Flame. "Of course, I have no issues with that. However, it doesn't seem like we have much time," Shifeng said after glancing the time. They only had 15 minutes before the competition officially began. If they did not enter the arena before the competition started, they would automatically forfeit the match, and their opponents would win without even fighting. "1 minute will be more than enough," Blue Phoenix said as she glanced at Shifeng's level, which he had modified to appear as level 35. "Phoenix Pavilion Master, what are your thoughts?" Shifeng turned to look at Phoenix Rain. "I'm also curious about Guild Leader Black Flame's judgment. Since he has chosen you to serve as the team leader, let me see your strength. If you cannot survive for 1 minute, I can only say that Guild Leader Black Flame is overly optimistic. If that's the case, I'll have to reconsider our cooperation." Despite observing Shifeng for a long time, she did not think that Shifeng was particularly strong. Although she felt a faint pressure from him, this pressure was minimal. It was far from the massive pressure she felt from Black Flame. "The nearby dueling ring is available. You two can fight there." In truth, Phoenix Rain was also curious about Shifeng's identity. She had seen Yifeng's name in Zero Wing's investigation report before. However, Yifeng had only appeared briefly during God's Domain's early stages. Afterward, he had not accomplished anything notable. Yet, Black Flame had given Yifeng full authority over the battle team for such an important event like the Dark Arena. Even Aqua Rose, Zero Wing's vice leader, was only the battle team's second in command. How could this situation not pique her interest? Based on Phoenix Rain's impression, Black Flame was a man of absolute calm. He knew his priorities and had glimpsed upon the world of the great. It was impossible that Black Flame did not understand the importance of the Dark Arena. Yet, he still delegated all responsibility to Yifeng. It would be unwise to cast aside Yifeng without testing the young man. Hence, she decided to take the time to test Yifeng's strength. If he could last 1 minute against Blue Phoenix, then he was relatively strong. It would not be impossible for him to secure victory in the upcoming match. After all, the other Zero Wing members of the battle team were relatively strong as well. "Since Phoenix Pavilion Master doesn't have any problems with it, I have no issues with it, either," Shifeng laughed as he walked towards the dueling ring. There were many dueling rings inside the underground arena that players could rent for practice matches. However, the higher rank the dueling ring was, the higher its rental fees were. In the dueling ring, as soon as Blue Phoenix and Shifeng turned towards each other, the duel's countdown began. 5 seconds. 4 seconds. Just as the duel was about to begin, Phoenix Rain suddenly noticed that Zero Wing's other members weren't particularly interested in watching. On the contrary, they chatted, carefree, with each other. "Underestimating my subordinate?" Phoenix Rain could not help but laugh. Her laughter, however, contained a hint of frost. Blue Phoenix noticed the behavior of Zero Wing's members. "Good. Very good. I intended to go easy and let your team leader last a few more seconds. Now, I'll take him down in 5 seconds. Blue Phoenix inwardly swore. Blue Phoenix was a level 36 Tier 1 elementalist. Meanwhile, her equipment consisted of level 35 dark gold and fine gold quality. The staff in her hand was even the level 30 dark gold ranked Dawn Scepter, a weapon she had obtained from a level 30 Hell Mode team dungeon. The dark gold ranked staff could even level with her to level 35. Overall, Blue Phoenix's magic damage was astonishing. Even her minor skills could inflict massive damage to an MT of the same level. Soon, the bell signaled the start of the duel. "Die." With a low shout, she began drawing several lines of runes with great familiarity. Immediately, dozens of ice spears appeared around her and shot towards Shifeng. Tier 1 Surekill spell, Ice Madness. Every ice spear contained immense power. Players that came into contact with the spears would suffer a debuff, their movement speed reducing by 40% and attack speed reducing by 30%. Under Blue Phoenix's control, dozens of ice spears flew towards Shifeng from all directions. The swordsman had nowhere to hide. Moreover, Blue Phoenix had already reached the Void Realm. She could perceive her surroundings and Shifeng's actions like the back of her hand. With Shifeng's slightest movements, she could immediately adjust the attack angle of her ice spears. However, this was not all. Suddenly, Blue Phoenix waved her hand, and two ice walls appeared in front of her, preventing Shifeng from charging at her. Chapter 776, Triple Casting. Chapter 776, Triple Casting. Such swift and fierce techniques. She must be more than just an ordinary expert of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Aqua Rose, who watched from the stands, was slightly stunned. She had not expected Blue Phoenix to be so highly skilled. Magical classes and melee classes' combat methods were different. Magical classes had to focus on their familiarity and control of their spells. The more familiar a player was with a spell, the faster they could cast said spell. Once they were familiar with a spell to a certain extent, they only needed minimal concentration to cast it. It was even possible for players to skip chanting completely and cast their spells instantaneously. Meanwhile, the higher a player's control was of their spells, the more spells they could cast simultaneously. Also, high-tiered spells required more control to cast. Multicasting spells was like multitasking in real life. One might be able to handle one task with ease but would find two or more simultaneous tasks difficult. For magical class players, without a certain level of control of their spells, it was impossible to cast multiple spells at once. Of course, there were some talented people who could multitask two or more tasks without training. If these people played a magical class, they could easily become experts. Even without a high degree of control, they could cast two or more spells simultaneously. One could overwhelm their enemies by multicasting spells, drowning them in a bombardment of magic. After all, evading one spell attack was already difficult, not to mention evading two or more. Being able to double-cast spells would greatly increase a magical class player's variety of attack methods. They would not have to rely on monotone attacks that could be easily avoided. Naturally, this would increase their combat power by leaps and bounds. Currently, Aqua Rose could only handle double casting. Moreover, she could only cast two Tier 0 spells simultaneously. Even casting one Tier 0 and one Tier 1 spell simultaneously was beyond her. Yet, Blue Phoenix was capable of multicasting a Tier 1 Shorekill spell and a Tier 0 spell. One could just imagine how superior Blue Phoenix was to her. Facing the dozens of incoming ice spears, Shifeng ran, leaving behind multiple afterimages as he moved. It was far more difficult to hit a moving player with a spell. Not to mention, Blue Phoenix had to focus on controlling so many ice spears. It's useless. Blue Phoenix had long since seen Shifeng's intentions and had taken countermeasures. However, Shifeng was also an expert in the Void Realm. He could sense the dozens of ice spears' exact locations. The instant the ice spears were about to reach him, he sidestepped and allowed the dozens of spears to brush past. He then circled the ice walls and approached Blue Phoenix. Although the Void Realm allowed players to perceive their surroundings clearly, their range was not unlimited. Their maximum range was 20 yards. As long as he was over 20 yards away from Blue Phoenix, the elementalist could not perceive his movements in such detail. It wouldn't be possible for her to change the trajectory of her ice spears in time. However, Blue Phoenix was no fool. While controlling ice madness, she also used the ice walls or instant cast frost arrows to hinder Shifeng's advance. Just as she was about to force Shifeng into a corner, she summoned 4 ice walls, surrounding Shifeng from all sides. The dozens of ice spears that had lain in wait descended on Shifeng. Boom! 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 Frost particles and white mist permeated the area. Is he dead? Blue Phoenix looked at the time. Only 3 seconds had passed since the battle had begun. Suddenly, Blue Phoenix felt that something was wrong. It felt as if a ferocious beast had just appeared behind her. Hurriedly, She activated Blink with a thought and appeared 15 yards away from her original position. Hua! Numerous blue sword lights blossomed Blue Phoenix's original location, slicing apart the afterimage she left behind. She had only been a thread away from Shifeng's strikes. Her senses sure are sharp. Shifeng sighed disappointedly. If he faced against any other class right now, he would have hit his opponent. Unfortunately, Blink could be cast with a single thought. The skill took effect instantaneously, allowing the user to appear 15 yards away. No matter how fast his sword was, it could not outmatch Blink. That was close. With her Void Realm perception, Blue Phoenix had realized what Shifeng had done. So, he still had such a move. Unfortunately, it is useless. I will end everything with this. Following which, Blue Phoenix waved her finger and used Ice Dragon's Roar. In the next moment, a powerful gush of cold air blasted towards Shifeng. Just as Shifeng was about to dodge to the left, 5 great fireballs appeared, flying at him. Double casting could allow magical class players to launch preemptive strikes, using the first attack to force the enemy to reveal a weak point, then attacking said weak point with the second spell. If ordinary players did not cope with the twofold attack properly, they would not even know how they died. Void Realm magical class experts sure are difficult to deal with. Having no better options, Shifeng retreated backward, intending to avoid the 5 great fireballs before evading the Ice Dragon's Roar. However, 2 ice walls suddenly appeared behind Shifeng, sealing his path of retreat. Impossible. Astonishment appeared on Aqua Rose's face. She can actually triple cast. Double casting was already Aqua Rose's limit. Even so, double casting had increased her combat power tremendously. Yet, Blue Phoenix could triple cast. She was simply inhuman. Despite both Ice Wall and Great Fireball being Tier 0 spells, when triple casted, they were far more powerful than a Tier 2 spell. Everyone finally realized just how frightening Blue Phoenix was. It was no wonder why she had confidently claimed that she could end the battle in 1 minute. Almost anyone would be helpless against her diverse attack method. A player's only option was to confront the incoming spells. However, against Blue Phoenix's high magic damage, just how many attacks of hers could one handle? Blue is taking this too seriously. Phoenix Rain sighed helplessly as she watched her comrade's performance. It seems that Blue will be participating in the competition. In the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, Blue Phoenix had even suppressed Martial Dragon before he had awakened his domain. Needless to say, an unknown character from Zero Wing stood no chance against the Elementalist. Hence, she had told Shifeng before that he would pass if he could survive a minute against Blue Phoenix. Now, however, it would seem that even 1 minute wasn't possible. With Blue Phoenix's current equipment, lasting 10 seconds against her serious efforts was impressive enough. Just as the Ice Dragon's Roar was about to devour Shifeng, he lightly swung Killing Ray at the torrent of cold air. Shio, 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 shio. Multiple streaks of blue lightning pierced the Ice Dragon's Roar. 2 streaks of lightning scattered the pure white spell. Following which, another 2 streaks snaked their way towards Blue Phoenix. When Blue Phoenix saw the incoming lightning bolts, she hurriedly cast Ice Walls and Flame Explosion to defend herself. Only after breaking the 3rd ice wall did the lightning bolts vanish. Such high strength. Blue Phoenix could not help her shock as she glanced at the evaporated ice wall. However, before Blue Phoenix recovered from her shock, she saw Shifeng swing Killing Ray once more. Hurricane. Immediately, countless wind blades flew towards Blue Phoenix, leaving no space for the Elementalist to dodge. Blue Phoenix hurriedly used Blink again, escaping Hurricane's attack range. However, Shifeng had already circled to her left and was only 20 yards away from her. Elementalists could cast Blink, at most, twice in a row, with each Blink charge having a cooldown of 12 seconds. Only a few seconds had passed since she used Blink the first time. Hence, her Blink was on cooldown and was unavailable. Do you think you can approach me just because I've used up my Blink? Blue Phoenix smiled disdainfully. Waving her staff, she began casting ice walls, one after another, to block Shifeng's path. At the same time, she used ice spheres to both slow and damage Shifeng. Slowed by evading the ice walls and ice spheres, as well as pinned down by her firepower, by the time Chiffon could close in the Elementalist, Blink would have finished its cooldown. By the time Chiffon could approach her, her blink would already be ready for use. Just as Blue Phoenix wondered how Chiffon would evade her attacks, Chiffon suddenly activated Defensive Blade and swung his sword at the ice wall before him. When one touched an ice wall, the spell would reduce their speed instantly. However, if one attacked an ice wall using Sword Aura, their speed would be unaffected. After activating Defensive Blade, Chiffon's attack range extended to 15 yards. Peng! Suddenly, the blue Sword Aura shattered the ice wall before Chiffon. He then charged past the broken ice wall. Don't even think about getting near me. Blue Phoenix cast more ice walls while bombarding Chiffon with ice spears. However, the instant her ice walls appeared, Chiffon's blue Sword Aura shattered them. The numerous ice spears Blue Phoenix fired shared a similar fate. When Chiffon was within 15 yards of Blue Phoenix, he suddenly brandished Killing Ray at the Elementalist and triggered the lightning effect. A streak of blue light shot across the dueling ring. Not only did the sword light pierce the blocking ice wall, but it also pierced Blue Phoenix's frost body. Numerous streaks of blue light then wrapped around Blue Phoenix, devouring her HP, dropping it to 0. Chapter 777, Times Are Different. Chapter 777, Times Are Different. When the white mist faded, the duel's outcome was on display above the ring. Victor, Yi-Feng. Just who is he? Shock and suspicion filled Phoenix Rain's eyes, her expression growing somewhat somber. She was very familiar with Blue Phoenix's basic attributes. The Elementalist definitely ranked at the very top of God's domain in this aspect. Yet, Chiffon had surpassed Blue Phoenix. An Elementalist's ice wall was not easily destroyed. Even a berserker of equal strength couldn't shatter an ice wall with 2 or 3 hits. Even if the berserker were slightly stronger, it was impossible to destroy an ice wall with a single hit. However, Chiffon's attributes still wasn't the most shocking aspect. What truly shocked her was his combat realm. Void Realm experts were rare. Yet, a little guild like Zero Wing actually had 2 such experts. Suddenly, Phoenix Rain realized that her knowledge of Zero Wing was somewhat lacking. Ha ha ha. Big brother Yi-Feng has won. Violet Cloud cheered. Someone had even boasted that they could end the battle in 1 minute. It seems that it was true. Blackie laughed. After her defeat, Blue Phoenix was dazed for quite some time. When she looked at the name displayed above the dueling ring, then looked at the young man standing before her, a bitter feeling arose in her heart. The battle had lasted less than 10 seconds. This was the first time she had lost so miserably after her training. Moreover, Yi-Feng did not seem to be particularly old. They should be roughly the same age. The bitter feeling of rivalry bloomed in Blue Phoenix's heart. In the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, she stood out among the other talents. Despite Martial Dragon being stronger than her, she had never once held him in any regard. After all, Martial Dragon was several years older than she was. She was younger and had more potential. As long as she was given enough time, she would, sooner or later, awaken her domain as well and become one of the true experts at the peak of God's domain. Yet, now, an expert who was around the same age but significantly stronger had appeared. What infuriated Blue Phoenix the most was that Yi-Feng was only a Void Realm expert, not someone with a domain. Despite the fact that they had reached the same combat realm, he had beaten her so ruthlessly. How could she accept this outcome? You're Yi-Feng, right? Blue Phoenix marched up to Chiffon, scanning the young man's appearance and committing it to memory. Emitem. Chiffon nodded as he wondered about Blue Phoenix's odd, analyzing gaze. I'll remember it. My name is Blue Phoenix. You must remember it. This name will surpass yours in the future. After saying so, Blue Phoenix turned and left the dueling ring. Chiffon laughed in response to Blue Phoenix's declaration. He had never thought the woman would have such an abrupt personality. However, this trait had allowed Blue Phoenix to improve herself continuously and become one of the top few experts in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. In the future, she would grow ridiculously strong, eventually becoming a Tier 6 mage god, an existence that countless people looked up to. In Shifeng's previous life, the Tier 6 goal had been far out of his reach. Now, however, he possessed the ability to contend with a future, god-ranked expert. After this fight, Shifeng's mentality had shifted slightly. Back then, he had struggled at the very bottom. Now, however, God's domain's peak was already within his reach. Surpass me. Shifeng smirked at the departing elementalist. Silently, he swore, those who I have surpassed will only find the gap between us widening. Phoenix Pavilion Master, do you still have qualms with my participation? Shifeng asked as he turned to Phoenix Rain. To avoid exposing his identity as Black Flame, not only had Shifeng altered his level and the appearance of his equipment using the demon mask, but he had also kept many of his skills hidden, using only a few basic swordsman techniques. Under normal circumstances, it would be impossible to discover his secret. Moreover, Yifeng's and Black Flame's auras were greatly different from each other. Yifeng's state was his natural state. He kept Yifeng's aura sheathed, as plain as water, and one would easily mistake him as a passerby. After donning the guise of Black Flame, however, he became more flamboyant. Black Flame was like an unsheathed sword, a powerful deterring force. Wherever he went, he was the center of attraction. He felt absolute to others. I never thought that guild leader Black Flame would have someone so powerful. Even in the battle in the Stoneclaw Mountains, you never made an appearance. It seems that Zero Wing really knows how to hide its strength. Guild leader Black Flame has even fooled me, Phoenix Rain said after thoroughly re-evaluating Shifeng. Although she suspected that Black Flame was Yifeng, their auras were vastly different. Moreover, she had even used a super-advanced identification skill that could see through disguises. Even the demon mask could not hide the truth from her skill. However, even with her identification skill, Shifeng's ID displayed as Yifeng, not Black Flame. This assured Phoenix Rain that they were not the same person. The only thing she discovered was that Yifeng had altered his level. She had never imagined that Yifeng was actually level 39, 3 levels higher than herself. Since he was 3 levels higher, there would naturally be a significant gap in terms of attributes. This explained why Blue Phoenix was no match for Shifeng. Phoenix Pavilion Master, it's getting late. If we don't enter the venue now, the organizer will most likely declare a forfeit, Shifeng said as he looked at the time. They had a little over 10 minutes remaining. They would be just in time if they hurried over immediately. As for whether or not Phoenix Rain had discovered his identity, Shifeng could easily tell by the woman's behavior that his truth was safe. It was obvious that Phoenix Rain had failed to uncover his secret. Moreover, nobody would assume that Zero Wing's almighty guild leader was just a fake identity, while Yifeng was his true identity. Even if someone did suspect him of being Black Flame and had used an advanced identification skill on him, they would only discover the identity of Yifeng. Even when he wore the guise of Black Flame, his secret was still safe. He always wore a black cloak while acting as Black Flame. Even an advanced identification skill could not uncover his information. With his identity hidden, outsiders would think that there were 2 great swordsman experts in Zero Wing. With that assumption, even a first-rate guild would grow wary of Zero Wing like Phoenix Rain was now. All right. I'll let you handle the rest. I hope that team leader Yifeng to bring me the good news of victory. Phoenix Rain smiled sweetly. She no longer treated Shifeng with indifference. On the contrary, she was surprised and pleased. With Yifeng's skills, the battle team's overall strength could not be underestimated. Moreover, with Yifeng's presence, everyone watching the competition would focus on Zero Wing. Nobody would bother with her, the battle team's backer. This way, she could earn a fortune in secret. Following which, Shifeng led Aqua Rose and the others to the underground arena's main venue. Big Sis Rain, I'm sorry. I lost to Yifeng. After Shifeng and the others left, Blue Phoenix was racked by guilt. Despite Phoenix Rain having the best resources the guild possessed, she still suffered defeat. Foolish girl, it was only natural that you lost. Do you know what level he is right now? Phoenix Rain chuckled softly, not blaming Blue Phoenix at all. Blue Phoenix shook her head in response. His level 39. Phoenix raid announced. Even the old monsters from super guilds have not reached that level yet. As for his weapons and equipment, even I don't know what he's wearing. Although his items looked plain and simple, it is clear that he had disguised them. Unfortunately, my identification skills cannot see through the disguise. Meanwhile, the fact that his attributes are far superior to yours shows that his weapons and equipment are extraordinary. It is especially true for those swords. I suspect they might even be epic weapons. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.